Chapter 6:21. You can search Poisonous Wife in Baidu. Search for the latest chapter. Well, you don't have to say it. I understand. Elder Zheng smiled meaningfully. What did you understand? Ling Li was almost hurt by Elder Zheng's chrysanthemum-like smile. He didn't expect that the first elder of the holy sect of Wind Thunder had the potential to gossip. He sighed secretly and didn't explain. He just said, "First elder, then I'll go back to the mountain first." "Go ahead." Elder Zheng waved his hand and didn't forget to remind him, "Your cultivation is low. Remember to take care of yourself." Ling Li staggered and almost fell on the threshold. He ran away without looking back. "Ha!" Elder Zheng laughed and looked at Ling Li's back. He couldn't help but sigh. It's so good to be young. Grand Elder Nan took Su Li and flew in the forbidden land of Phoenix Thunder for a short time. Then they landed on the edge of a dead fire crater. Grand Elder Nan made a gesture with both hands and opened the seal of the crater. Suddenly, a fiery red thunder snake rushed out, and there was a faint sound of thunder in Su Li's ears. Su Li's eyes flashed. She didn't say anything and followed Grand Elder Nan into the volcano. Su Qingshui, the divine thunder, is in the center of the volcano. Do you know why I took you to see the divine thunder in a hurry? Grand Elder Nan was walking in front of Yu along the tunnel that had been dug. Before Su Li answered, her low and hoarse voice echoed in the tunnel. "My name is Xiang Nan, and the Grand Elder Hua you know is my brother who has no blood relationship with me, Xiang Hua. Thunder Ancestor was alone all his life. Both of us were orphans picked up by Thunder Ancestor from the outside world. After my adoptive father died, the sect was no longer powerful. In order to ensure the inheritance, the Divine Thunder of Fire and the Divine Thunder of Gold were separated according to my adoptive father's last words. My brother and I kept them separately. It has been 10,000 years. Grand Elder Nan sighed with emotion in her old and turbid eyes. Time flies so fast. In a blink of an eye, I have become an old woman with a wrinkled face. Speaking of this, Grand Elder Nan laughed. Qingshui, it's boring to listen to me, isn't it? No. Su Li looked well-behaved. Grand Elder, since you have guarded the divine thunder of fire for 10,000 years, why haven't you found a person to inherit it? If there is a disciple who can control the divine thunder of fire, maybe the glory sect can be restored to its former glory. You little girl, it's easy for you to say. But how can it be so easy to find a suitable person? Grand Elder Nan shook his head and laughed. There was a hint of disappointment in his eyes. In the past 10,000 years, the holy sons and holy virgins change every 2,000 years. It's not that no one has ever cultivated the Fire Thunder True Book. However, the fire element Divine Thunder is the most violent Divine Thunder among the 5 elements Divine Thunder. The metal element Divine Thunder is not far behind. After the Divine Lightning entered their bodies, all the holy sons and holy daughters failed without exception. Su Li's eyes flashed. She still had the Divine Thunder of water in her body. Water and fire were incompatible. If she chose to integrate the Divine Thunder of fire first, it would be much more difficult. Initially, she wanted to fuse the Divine Thunder of metal first. Among the 5 elements, metal gives birth to water, and the conflict between metal and water is much smaller. Alas, plans can't keep up with the changes. Your arrival is undoubtedly a pleasant surprise. Grand Elder Nan smiled gently. When I can remember, my foster father was not in good health. He often hid from us and vomited blood for a period of time. Before he died, he talked about this inheritance jade talisman the most. I don't know the meaning of the mark on the back of the jade token, but my foster father said that if someone can come to the sect with this jade token, if he is a promising talent, the sect must cultivate him even with all its resources. An inexplicable expression appeared on Su Li's face, and then she sighed softly. Qingshui, I don't deserve it. That Thunder Ancestor should be the emperor of the same era as Ling Qingshui. The person who most likely held this jade token was Ling Qingshui's sealed son, Ling Li. That was why Thunder Ancestor asked her to do so. Oh, don't feel guilty. Since this thing can fall into your hands, it's fate. Grand Elder Nan patted Su Li's thin shoulder gently. you disabled Qingqing. If this happened before he mastered the authentic Book of Metal, it was a trivial matter, but now it's a big deal. Su Li's eyes flashed. She did notice the golden mark of thunder and lightning between Qingqing's eyebrows. But with her strength, even if Qingqing mastered all the marks of thunder and lightning of the 5 elements, he still couldn't survive one move from her. The reason why she was still alive was that she still cared about taking the things of the holy sect of Wind Thunder. If she killed him again, it would be too much. So even if you have just learned the holy method, I have to bring you here and announce to the public that you have understood the mark of divine thunder of fire and are practicing in isolation. In this way, Xianghua can't do anything to you. Grand Elder Nin stuffed a rune into Su Li's palm and whispered, "Hide this thing well. It's really unrealistic for you to awaken the mark of divine thunder of fire in just a few days. If Xianghua insists on verifying your mark of thunder and lightning, you can secretly crush this rune and cooperate with me to cast a spell on the side. It's foolproof." Su Li was stunned. She took the rune and kept silent. She couldn't understand why Xiang Nan trusted her so unreservedly with a token of inheritance. She was just a stranger he knew for a few days. If it were her, she definitely couldn't do it. Grand Elder Nan seemed to see Su Li's concerns. He smiled and turned to walk slowly along the path. "Let's go. Don't think too much. The token has spirit, and you are the master. You must have something extraordinary. That is to say, you are the most promising candidate to inherit the divine thunder in the past 10,000 years. I also want to see my foster father's wish come true in my lifetime. I hope someone can restore the prosperity of Wind Thunder Sect." Su Li raised her head and followed him with a smile. "With your blessing, I will make Wind Thunder Sect one of the top sects in Qingshui's circle." "Ha ha ha, silly girl. Wait until you inherit the divine thunder." Elder Zheng sent Ling Li away and returned to the study. But he felt that his whole body was heavy and it became difficult to breathe. His pupils shrank. He looked up and saw a figure in a gray robe with his back to him in the room. His face changed slightly. He carefully walked to the man in a gray robe and saluted, "Grand Elder Hua." The old man in a gray robe turned around and slapped his sleeve on Elder Zheng's face, making a crisp sound. "Slap. You also know that there is a second Grand Elder in Wind Thunder Sect." Xianghua's old face was gloomy. "Where is Su Qingshui?" Elder Zheng lowered his head and was silent for a moment. Then he replied, "I don't know." "You don't know?" Xianghua was so angry that he laughed. "Do you think I can't guess if you don't tell me? If you cover up the murderer, Wind Thunder Sect will be destroyed by Xiang Nan sooner or later. As the first elder, you were selfish. Don't let me catch you. Otherwise, even Xiang Nan can't save you." "I dare not." Elder Zheng saluted again and again, watching the old man in a gray robe leave angrily. He was completely disappointed with this Grand Elder. Cover up? Selfishness? Anyone can say this word, but you, Xianghua, are not qualified. Qingqing has done so many bad things over the years, but you have forgiven him, which has corrupted the sect. Grand Elder Nan wanted to argue with you several times, but you turned a blind eye to it. Now that Qingqing has kicked Su Qingshui, you finally know to stand up for him. When he heard the news that Su Qingshui had disabled Qingqing, the first thought in his mind was surprise, and then Su Qingshui was worried. He didn't sympathize with Qingqing at all, which showed how much he hated Qingqing. But in Xianghua's eyes, this kind of worthless thing is actually regarded as a treasure. These words had been hidden in Elder Zheng's heart for many years, because Grand Elder Nin still cared about the old friendship and wanted the sect to have a backer, so he couldn't bear to fall out with him. Grand Elder Nan, you still regard him as your elder brother, but in his eyes, you are just a stumbling block for him to control the sect. Elder Zheng sighed deeply and hurriedly sent a message to Grand Elder Nan. Next was the game of chess at the level of Grand Elder, and it was not suitable for him to show up. In the center of the volcano, the red leaves of the sycamore tree reflected in the transparent magma like an ocean of flames. In the cave full of the smell of sulfur, the red was dazzling and glaring. If a mortal was here, he would be melted by the scorching air in an instant. But for Xiang Nan, this temperature didn't affect his movement at all. The temperature here is over 1,000 degrees. Qing Shui, can you bear it? Xiang Nan looked back and saw Su Li's expression as usual, and couldn't help but be surprised. Su Li smiled. My physical body is stronger than that of ordinary people. I see. Xiang Nan was surprised. Physical practitioners always had all kinds of toughness that was hard for practitioners of Dharma to understand. It was easier to show when the practitioner's cultivation was low. She had doubts about Su Li easily defeating Qin Qing. Now, she felt it was normal. According to Qin Qing's character, he must have underestimated Su Qing Shui. In close combat, how could Qin Qing, who had a weak physical body, be this girl's opponent? Thinking of this, Xiang Nan was more satisfied with Su Li. The pain of inheriting the divine thunder was beyond imagination. With a strong physical body and a strong self-healing ability, the possibility of inheriting the divine thunder was higher. As long as Su Qing Shui could awaken the mark of fire and thunder, she could start to try directly. This sycamore tree is transformed by the divine thunder of fire. Thinking of this, Xiang Nan pointed to the fiery red sycamore tree in front of him that covered the whole cave. You haven't awakened the mark of fire and thunder, so don't get close to it. Otherwise, the mark of fire and thunder will enter your body in advance, and you will be seriously injured in an instant, which will affect the process of inheriting. Xiang Nan looked serious and exhorted her again and again. You stay here to practice and don't move. There are enough celestial stones in this universe ring for you to practice. I will come back to see your practice progress in a few days. Su Li glanced at the fiery red giant tree and looked back at Xiang Nan. She nodded gently. Grand Elder, don't worry. I am not a reckless person. Xiang Nan smiled with relief and turned to leave with his back bent. Su Li quickly spread out her divine awareness. When she saw Xiang Nan fly away from the crater in her divine awareness, Su Li turned her eyes and began to make a gesture with her hands. Pieces of restriction runes fell like black snowflakes and formed a huge black net. Then they broke into pieces and drilled into the pores of the cave, covering the whole volcanic karst cave. The ghost restriction encirclement was formed in an instant. If Yi Che were here, he would be shocked. Su Li's ghost restriction had reached a profound realm. After finishing this step, Su Li narrowed her eyes and said softly, Su Bai. Chapter 622. You can search for Poisonous Wife in Baidu. Search for the latest chapter. Boom! In this fiery red space, jade green divine radiance shone brightly, instantly turning the scorching hot volcanic cave into a warm and cool spring. The fiery red space was compressed to an extremely small area of 100 feet, and even the Wudong tree became smaller. Sister, in the green light, Su Bai walked out barefoot. He was wearing a pure white robe, and his green waist-length hair fluttered without wind. The pair of starry eyes on his handsome and perfect face immediately became brighter when he saw Su Li. I haven't let you come out for a long time. Have you ever blamed me? Su Li stroked his hair and whispered softly. He closed his eyes comfortably and leaned against her. How could I? I've never blamed you. If you hadn't risked your life, I wouldn't have grown so fast. As he spoke, he turned his eyes and focused on the sycamore tree, which was suppressed and trembling in the corner. I can feel that it's afraid and a little unwilling. Perhaps a long time ago, it was a divine thunder more powerful than me, but it suffered irreversible damage in a battle, and its spiritual body was destroyed. In addition, it hasn't been fed by the innate thunder for a long time, so it only has a little spiritual light hanging on, half dead. Su Li nodded. The state of the divine thunder of fire was similar to what she had expected. Let's get started. Su Bai smiled slightly and floated down on the sycamore tree. Give me a quarter of an hour to communicate with it, and it will willingly follow you. Su Li nodded gently, her eyes full of smiles. She had not awakened the mark of the fire thunder, but as long as she could come into contact with the divine thunder, the mark was not a problem at all. Speaking of which, she had to thank Grand Elder Hua for giving her a hand behind her back. Xiang Nan flew out of the crater and saw Xiang Hua's figure approaching quickly. Her expression was slightly cold, and she turned her hand to close the volcano seal. Nan, you disappoint me. Xiang Hua stopped in front of Xiang Nan, his old face cold. Do you even have to guard against me now? Brother, it's not that I don't believe you. Xiang Nan looked at his elder brother with a bitter expression. As long as Qin Qing has the slightest bit of talent, I won't indulge Xing Shui. But look at what Qin Qing has done all these years. What? Xiang Hua raised his voice, his anger rising. What's wrong with Qin Qing? He had already awakened the Golden Thunder Mark and was the best candidate to inherit the divine thunder of metal. But now, he was crippled by a female disciple who had only joined the sect for a few days. And you, as the sect's Grand Elder, actually ignored the sect's rules and harbored criminals? Do you think I'm blind about who's right and who's wrong? You're blind! Pain appeared in Xiang Nan's eyes. What did foster father teach us? Character is the most important thing. No matter how talented Qin Qing is, he can't be nurtured. Aren't you afraid of nurturing an ingrate? Then how can you guarantee that Su Qingshui is not an ungrateful person? Xiang Hua sneered. I don't want to argue with you. Get out of my way. Since she dared to cripple my disciple, I'll cripple her. Xiang Nan took a deep breath. Her heart felt like it had fallen into an ice cellar. She finally gave up on trying to reason with her brother. Her voice also became cold. She is the holder of the ancient keepsake. No one in the sect is allowed to hurt her. Ancient keepsake? Xiang Hua continued to sneer. It's not clear whether it's true or not. Don't be fooled by someone with ulterior motives. Even if it's true, it's been 10,000 years. How can such an ancient agreement be counted? Xiang Hua, you're really old and muddle-headed. You don't even listen to foster father's words. What do you want? Xiang Nan felt a stabbing pain in her heart. How did her gentle and considerate brother become like this? I don't want to do anything. Xiang Hua flicked his sleeves. I only know that the inheritor of the metal divine thunder was destroyed by Su Qingshui. How can I swallow this? If you still care about the past, then get out of my way. The inheritor of the metal divine thunder. Xiang Nan snorted coldly. Su Qingshui is the inheritor of the fire divine thunder. It's fine if you don't listen to foster father's instructions, but you can't disobey the sect's rules and regulations, right? The inheritor of the fire thunder? Xiang Hua's eyes widened, and then he laughed out loud. Are you kidding me? Su Qingshui has only been in the sect for a few days. How can he awaken the fire thunder mark so quickly? If you don't believe it, I'll make you give up. Xiang Nan flicked his sleeves and swept away the seal of the crater. He said coldly, follow me into the mountain. If you get the verification, leave immediately. The Fire Divine Thunder Mountain is my home field. If you want to fight, don't blame me for being merciless. Okay, Xiang Nan, this is how you treat your brother. Xiang Hua sneered. I'd like to see if Su Qingshui is as evil as you said. Xiang Nan didn't want to say another word to Xiang Hua. Without looking back, he entered the crater of the volcano. Xiang Hua immediately jumped in after him without saying a word. A moment later, in the center of the volcano, the Wutong tree was swaying. Everything was the same as when Xiang Nan left. Why is the temperature here a little lower? Xiang Nan walked in front and was a little surprised. But the temperature didn't drop, obviously, so he didn't think much. Seeing Su Li sitting in meditation, he smiled and walked forward, saying, Qingshui, come here to meet Grand Elder Hua. Su Li opened her eyes, and a red light flashed in her eyes. She hadn't completely digested the divine thunder of fire, but getting up was not a problem. Hearing Xiang Nan calling her, she walked to Xiang Nan and bowed slightly, saying, I'm Su Qingshui, Grand Elder Hua. Xiang Hua snorted, and an inexplicable look flashed in his eyes. You look beautiful, but I don't know if your talent is as evil as you said. Xiang Nan looked at him in surprise, wondering why Xiang Hua's attitude suddenly softened. But this was the best. He hurriedly said, Qingshui, show the mark of fire and thunder. In this way, you will be recognized by us for sinking the divine thunder of fire, and you can stay here justifiably. As he said, Xiang Nan pinched a rune with one hand in his sleeve. The rune hidden in Su Li's clothes immediately burned, and a mark of fire and thunder appeared between her eyebrows. Did you really awaken the mark of fire and thunder? Xianghua looked at Su Qingshui in shock, but Su Li felt that his shock was a little fake. With a thought, the pneuma of fire and thunder in her body rushed to between her eyebrows. Suddenly, Xianghua instantly grabbed Xiang Nan's right hand, which was pinching the rune. "Ha, Nan, do you really think I am a fool? How dare you play a trick under my nose?" Xiang Nan's face changed dramatically. When he was about to say something, he heard Su Qingshui's puzzled voice. "Grand Elder Hua, what are you doing?" "Fraud! Su Qingshui, you?" Xianghua turned his head, but his words stopped abruptly. He stared blankly at the fiery red mark between Su Li's eyebrows that was still shining. What was going on? He clearly interrupted Xiang Nan's spell, but why was there still a mark of fire and thunder between Su Qingshui's eyebrows? And the pneuma of fire and thunder was too strong, as if she had inherited the divine thunder of fire. "Look, I'm not lying." Xiang Nan quickly let go of Xianghua's hand. Although he didn't know what was going on, he was relieved and refuted Xianghua. "What else do you have to say now?" Xianghua's face turned blue and white, and he was suddenly at a loss for words. After a moment of silence, he swung his sleeves fiercely and snorted. "Su Qingshui, you are very good." With that, he left without looking back. Su Li looked at his back meaningfully. A black light flashed in her eyes, and she vaguely saw the nature of Xianghua. Grand Elder Nan seemed to be a little pitiful. "Qingshui, you did a good job." After Xianghua left, Xiang Nan's tense body relaxed, and he said with lingering fear, "If you weren't alert and Xianghua saw through the truth, the consequences would be unimaginable. But what's the matter with your mark of fire and thunder?" The mark between Su Li's eyebrows gradually faded, and she explained with a smile, "I also have a rough understanding of the method of talisman, and I have thought about what to do if there is an accident. So, I made an extra preparation, but I didn't expect it to really be used." Xiang Nan nodded with satisfaction. Su Qingshui was so careful, and she couldn't help but feel gratified. Compared with Chun Qingshui, such an inherited disciple was what she wanted. Since Xianghua left, it means that he won't pursue this matter anymore. "Do you choose to stay here or go back to the Holy Girl Mount?" Su Li glanced at the Wutong tree, and her face showed helplessness. "Although I want to get in touch with the Divine Thunder as soon as possible, it's still too early." "Okay." Xiangnan also thought so. So he nodded and said, "Then you go back to the Holy Girl Mount and try not to go out recently, so as not to offend Grand Elder Hua." "I'll take care of it." Su Li nodded, looked at the sea of Wudong trees, and suddenly sighed. "The divine thunder of fire is so spectacular, and I really don't know what the divine thunder of metal looks like." "Ha ha." Xiang Nan was also relaxed at this moment. Hearing Su Li's slightly naive words, he couldn't help but laugh. "Although I can't enter Xianghua's Gingjin Pagoda, if you want to see the divine thunder of metal, it's not difficult for me to set up a water mirror for you." "Gingjin Pagoda?" Su Li blinked. "What's that?" Xiang Nan had complete trust in Su Li, and immediately replied, "Just like the Fire Thunder Mountain, the Gingjin Pagoda is also a holy treasure, which is used to store the divine thunder of metal. However, the holy treasure is in Xianghua's hands, and if I go in, I will be restrained everywhere." Su Li suddenly understood. So the Fire Thunder Mountain is also a holy treasure? No wonder Grand Elder Hua was very well behaved and didn't fight even though he was angry. "That's right." As Xiang Nan said, he seemed to recall something and said helplessly, "These two holy treasures belong to the Thunder Ancestor, and they are powerful magic treasures to win. But in the hands of my brother and I, we can't exert 10% of their power. They can only be used as tools to carry the divine thunder. It's ridiculous." Su Li was moved, but she asked calmly, "Why?" "Because of the divine thunder, of course." The wrinkles on Xiang Nan's old face were squeezed together with a smile. He looked at Su Li expectantly. "If you can control the divine thunder of fire one day, I will also pass this holy treasure to you. At that time, your combat power will definitely be higher. Looking at Xiang Nan's eyes that suddenly brightened, Su Li inexplicably felt a little dazzling. Grand Elder Nan, the person you entrusted is not a good man. Chapter 6:23. You can search Poisonous Wife in Baidu. Search for the latest chapter. A moment later, Xiang Nan and Su Li left together. After they left, the sea of parasol trees instantly turned into phantoms and disappeared, and the high temperature in the volcano cave gradually subsided. Xiang Nan, who had a poor control of the holy treasure, didn't know this. Su Li returned to the Mount Holy Girl and stepped into the adytum to practice in isolation without saying a word. Seeing this, Lingley could only restrain his thoughts and continue to stay in the side hall. Bang! As soon as the door of the adytum was closed, the uncontrollable flames in Su Li's eyes suddenly rose and burned in her pupils, illuminating the whole adytum. Su Li's eyes were slightly cold. She waved her hand to cast a restriction to completely isolate the high temperature to prevent the adytum from being melted by the divine thunder of fire. Then she sat cross-legged and sank her mind into the pubic region. At this moment, in the pubic region, red and blue colors converged. Every time they collided, destructive fluctuations would be aroused. Like a small bomb, Su Li's entire meridians were blown into pieces. Then, under the powerful resilience of the physical body, the meridians were restored to their original state in a few breaths. The cycle repeated and slowly blended. Water and fire were incompatible. If she wanted to make them coexist peacefully, the running in must be accompanied by endless pain. But even so, Su Li had no other reaction except frowning faintly. As long as she could achieve her goal, pain was just a trivial matter for her. Master, if you force the fusion like this, how long will it take? Black Lotus appeared at the right time and reminded. It's impossible for you to make the divine thunder of two completely opposite properties to make them laugh in a short time. Su Li frowned slightly. Cut the crap. You know I don't have much time. Just show me what you can do. Black Lotus was used to being scolded by Su Li, so he couldn't help but pout. The Black Lotus ring flashed, and a jade slip floated out by itself. This is the elixir matrix, a trick. It's just an expedient measure. If you want to integrate the divine thunder of 5 elements, this method can't help you. A sharp light flashed in Su Li's eyes. She grabbed the jade slip and stuck it between her eyebrows, and a large amount of information immediately integrated into her awareness sea. This pill formation was not a pill formation, but a dantian formation. It was unknown what kind of existence had come up with the idea of turning one's dantian into a formation, dividing it into several independent spaces. However, these spaces were not permanent. They could only be maintained for a few months at most. After that, it would be best for the cultivator to disperse. If one were to forcefully maintain it, the longer it lasted, the greater the damage it would cause to the cultivator. For ordinary practitioners, it is beneficial and harmless. But for Su Li now, it is the best secret skill. Kejai, you really have a lot of good stuff hidden away. Su Li crushed the jade slip and stared at Black Lotus. I hope you can tell me what the real supernatural power of Black Lotus Ring is one day. This king, on the other hand, hopes that such a day will not come. Black Lotus said dryly and disappeared into the ring in an instant. Su Li didn't bother to care about him. She took a deep breath and recalled the secret skill in her mind. With a move of her mind, her pubic region immediately changed. A pattern of Tai Chi was faintly sketched above the Black Lotus throne. The 2 balls of divine thunder energy seemed to be drawn and flowed into the yin-yang fish on both sides respectively. The fire in Su Li's eyes gradually faded, and her breath returned to peace. So fast. Black Lotus hid in the ring and saw this scene. Looking at the posture, Su Li can arrange the fire thunder clearly in the evening. This is the most difficult crafty skill to practice. Why is it not difficult for Su Li? Samsara heard the words and couldn't help laughing. Do you remember that it took you 200 years to practice this skill? You also suppressed the divinity in a mess and had to ask me for help. Shut up. Black Lotus's face darkened again. I am a genius. How could he be in such a sorry state? Idiot, don't think that you can fabricate my dark history just because you have more memory than me. You know very well whether it's fake or not. Samsara lay on one side and used his two claws to pull the remaining half of the life-returning mirror. Now I share the same fate as Su Li, and we are in the same boat. If you don't hand over the real method to recognize me as the master, I can't help but tell on you. How dare you? Black Lotus's face suddenly changed, and he warned sternly. Samsara looked at Black Lotus's cowardly look and couldn't help laughing. Haha, I am the master's life-bonded magic treasure. Why wouldn't I dare? After digesting this small half of the mirror, my magic treasure will be completely awakened. At that time, who knows who will be the boss? Damn it, idiot. Do you really think I don't dare to teach you a lesson? Don't hit my face. I will fight with you. I will kill you, son of a bitch. The space in the ring instantly became a mess, but the outside world was quiet, and the night fell. In Shengtian Palace, it seemed to be always night. On the dark throne, drops of light shone on the gloomy face of the Lord of Shengtian Shrine. He was careless. He never expected that Ling Li would suddenly awaken his bloodline in the Tianjiao battle and get rid of the shackles of the Lihan sword. The remnants of the Ling family in Shengxian Mountain also disappeared overnight. Ling Li's fate was separated from Shengtian Shrine. The secret skill of life borrowing had a fatal flaw in an instant. In just a few days, there were countless accidental deaths and injuries in the sect. If Fate Ancestor didn't help offset part of the backfire at the critical moment, he might even lose his life. But even so, there were accidents and deaths in the sect every day, and many disciples were in a panic. All of this was caused by the evil son's departure from the sect. What's wrong with being the evil emperor of Shengtian Shrine? I gave you status and strength, but why didn't you feel grateful after awakening your bloodline? Why did you choose to leave immediately? The low and unwilling voice of Shengtian Shrine echoed in the hall. Ling Li, you can't escape. The Lord of Shengtian Shrine suddenly stood up and waved his hand to draw a round portal. He walked in and instantly came to a pure white dome palace. In the center of the palace, there was an altar. On it, a palm-sized golden pagoda was floating in the golden light and rotating slowly. The Lord of Shengtian Shrine glanced at the pagoda with awe in his eyes. Then he turned around and came to the hall, bowing to the white throne. Fate Ancestor, please show up. Swish. As if hearing the call, the white throne flashed a dazzling light. When the light dissipated, there was a white man on the throne. This man's face couldn't be seen clearly. His white hair glowed with a little golden light under the light, which made him noble and dignified. This man was Fate Ancestor. Bai Ming, you finally figured it out? Bai Ming's low voice sounded in the hall. It was inexplicably sweet, but it also seemed to have an inexplicable bewitching sound, which was intoxicating. The Lord of Shengtian Shrine bowed. Fate Ancestor, please save me. Save thousands of disciples of Shengtian Shrine. Haha, I have said that. Bai Ming chuckled and said in a gentle voice, Ling Li was born to be rebellious. Even with the restraint of Lihan's sword, there is a possibility of reversal. But you didn't listen to me at that time. You insisted on doing this and felt happy, so I let you do it. Today, the truth has come to light, and you come to me crying. I have expected it. Fate Ancestor is right. The Lord of Shengtian Shrine kowtowed again and again. He didn't have the majesty outside. In front of Fate Ancestor, he was more like a henchman who only knew how to kowtow. It's useless for me to say more since it has come to this. I only hope that Fate Ancestor can deduce Ling Li's position. I will borrow his blood to unlock the life skill and save the people of the sect. Borrow? Bai Ming's smile was more sarcastic. He already knows that you deceived him. How can he borrow? And it's not only blood, but also life. The face of the Lord of Shengtian Shrine with his hat down showed anger. If it weren't for me, he would have died. I have raised him for 2,000 years. Now it's only right that he returns his life. That's right. Bai Ming's sleeve suddenly shot out a ray of light and blended into the altar tower. The tower suddenly rotated rapidly, and a series of blurred pictures began to appear. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine was relieved when he saw this and said skillfully, "Fate Ancestor, what kind of sacrifice do you need? Is it a virgin boy or a virgin girl? I'll find it now." "Not this time." Bai Ming stared at the tower and said casually, "You have been in a mess recently. How can I distract you again?" Before killing Ling Li, maintaining the status quo of Xingtian Shrine is the most important thing you should do. Yes. My lord, you are right. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine nodded repeatedly and breathed a sigh of relief. The virgin boys and girls he had collected over the years had almost been used up by Fate Ancestor. Now it was not easy for him to find them again. After waiting for a while, the rotation speed of the tower suddenly slowed down, but there was no picture on it. Bai Ming raised his white eyebrows slightly at once. Then he seemed to think of something, and a smile appeared on his blurry face. "Interesting. Ling Li's position can't be seen clearly." "What?" The Lord of Xingtian Shrine looked at the tower in amazement. "Ling Li doesn't understand the natural law. How can the natural law pagoda not see his position?" "Ling Li doesn't understand, but someone does," Bai Ming reminded. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine immediately reacted, and his face changed slightly. Su Jiuzhou, the person who could make the natural law pagoda unable to find her position, except for the old monsters who were shielded by the Tianqing Valley, was only her. Why is Ling Li with Su Jiuzhou? Is it hard to guess? Bai Ming waved his hand and blended two rays of white light into the tower, and said casually, "Su Jiuzhou is covered by the natural law, and I still don't know her true identity. However, what she did was aimed at me. And with the power of the battle in the reincarnation mirror, those old bastards who had been locked in the reincarnation mirror were mostly on her side. As for Ling Li, although his father was not killed by me, it is impossible for him not to hate me. The two of them have the same goal, so it's not surprising that they are together." As soon as Bai Ming's voice fell, the tower suddenly made a clear jingle, fixed in the air, and projected into the nothingness. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine looked at the scene in the projection and suddenly showed joy. Fate Ancestor's voice was emotionless. "I once predicted that this sect would have such a disaster, but I didn't expect it to be because of this. You should know what to do." The killing intent flashed in the eyes of the Lord of Xingtian Shrine. "Thank you for your guidance, Fate Ancestor." Chapter 624. You can search Poisonous Wife in Baidu. Search for the latest chapter. Holy Sect, Holy Girl Hall. Ling San. Has Her Highness not come out yet? In the side hall, Shuizhen held the food box and asked with a complaining face. "No." Ling Li opened his eyes and spat out two words. He was really not in the mood to talk with Shuizhen, but he couldn't stop anyone from entering the side hall. "The cakes I made by myself are wasted again. Her Highness is only more than 700 years old. Doesn't she feel bored practicing in isolation every day? When will she come out?" Shuizhen was annoyed and angry for a moment. Then she opened the food box and put the exquisite cakes in front of Ling Li. She said while eating, "You eat too. I can't eat so much by myself. It will be a waste if I don't eat." Hearing Shuizhen's incessant chatter, Ling Li sighed and stopped thinking about integrating the bloodline. He picked up a cake and ate it silently. Shuizhen couldn't help but get angry when she saw his reluctance. She snorted, "I really don't know what the holy girl likes about you. You're like a piece of wood. You're not interesting at all." Ling Li was stunned and thought of something. He looked up and asked, "Am I very boring?" "Of course. You take the side hall with you every day and don't go anywhere," Shuizhen chattered, but Ling Li didn't hear a word. He was suddenly very confused. What did Su Li like about him in those days? In the reincarnation mirror, although he had multiple identities and high positions, Su Li was also the leader of a force, and her force was even more extensive than his. Except for the identity of Child Li, he sadly found that he couldn't think of what could make people like him. "Hey, Ling San, don't tell me I've given you a shock." Shuizhen noticed Ling Li's strangeness and quickly swallowed the cake in her mouth. She whispered, "I didn't mean it. Although you are not good-looking, Your cultivation is not high, and your character is even boring, but you can't resist Her Highness's love." Lingli was shocked and raised his head. Shuezhen shook her head and said, "I heard from senior sisters in the sect that there is no reason to like someone. Don't get yourself into a dead end." Didn't she need a reason to like someone? Yes. Lingli pursed his lips and smiled slightly. He liked Su Li, and he loved Su Li without reason and without reservation. After thinking it through, Lingli suddenly felt much better. Even if she was no longer around, he still loved her. As long as he loved her, she would always be around. Lingli unconsciously touched his heart with his right hand. "Hey, Ling-san, you actually smiled?" Shuezhen seemed as if she had discovered a new continent. She came over with a face full of surprise. "Don't tell me you've really fallen for His Highness?" "I was just joking. Maybe His Highness is just lusting after you," Su Li said. Suddenly, Su Li's voice echoed in the side hall, which scared Shuezhen. She quickly swallowed the second half of the sentence and almost choked herself to death. Li Su Su Shue Su 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 Li. She suddenly heard Li Su Li Su Su Ling Shi Li. I. X Shue out. Shue XD Shue. Ling Li Su Li Shue spirit. To Li Shue Li Shue Su. He was wrong. He was a pawn of Shengtian Shrine. He was deceived and used by the Lord of Shengtian Shrine, but he only got pain in return. But Shuezhen was different. Su Jiuzhou took advantage of her, but she also got happiness because of Su Jiuzhou's use. Yes, happiness. She got rid of Qin Qing. Her life was free and rich, which could be described as happiness. In this way, it could be regarded as mutual benefit. Lingli stood up and walked into the main hall. Although Su Jiuzhou used reincarnation mirror to force him, which made him unhappy, he would not be stingy to apologize. "Shuezhen, do you know where the Gongjin Pagoda is?" Su Li leaned on the throne and asked softly. At this moment, her pneuma was restored to the state of returning to nature. No one in Holy Sect of Wind Thunder could see that she had two kinds of divine thunders. The Gongjin Pagoda? Shuezhen was really upset about the pastry. When she heard it, she was surprised. "Are you talking about the Gongjin Pagoda, the residence of Grand Elder Hua?" "Grand Elder Hua lives in the Gongjin Pagoda?" Su Li frowned slightly. Shuezhen nodded and said, "Yes. All disciples know that the residence of Grand Elder Hua is in it, but no one dares to go there, because the golden qi in the Gongjin Pagoda is too heavy. If one's cultivation hasn't reached the middle stage of Huashan realm, he will be easily injured by the golden qi." Speaking of this, Shuezhen stuck out her tongue. "I heard it from the little holy boys and holy girls in the sect, but I don't know if it's true or not." Su Li thought for a moment and waved her hand. "It's all right. You can leave now." "Yes, Your Highness. I learned a new pastry today. I'll make it for you." Shuezhen blushed as she finished speaking. She turned around and left happily. Lingli watched her pass in front of him and saw her out of the hall. Then he walked to Su Li, looking at her pale face. He couldn't help but say, "You just got the divine thunder of fire. How can you get the divine thunder of gold so soon? Can your body bear it?" Xiangnan's cultivation was still a little low, so he didn't notice the abnormality. From the moment Su Li returned to the hall, he sensed the pneuma of fire and thunder escaping from her. In addition, Su Jiuzhou practiced in isolation for a few days as soon as she came back. It was not difficult to guess the result of Su Jiuzhou's success. Lord Evil Emperor should care about people. The sun really rises from the west. Su Li snorted coldly. "It's my business." "It's none of your business." "Do you think I want?" Lingli said indifferently with a cold face. "The divine thunder of gold and fire is the most manic. When the divine thunder collides, it is comparable to nature's punishment. The reincarnation mirror can't stand the damage of the second thunder punishment." "Thank you for reminding me, Lord Evil Emperor. I won't come here to die." Su Li waved her hand casually and said with a smile, "If you have the leisure time, why don't you integrate more bloodlines? Maybe one day you can surpass me. Then you don't have to be my follower. You can directly take the reincarnation mirror from me." Ling Li's heart jumped. He snorted and turned his head. He closed his eyes and stopped talking. There was a touch of gentleness in Su Li's eyes. But just in an instant, the gentleness turned into indifference and calculation. She had successfully divided the pubic region into 3 areas. But the most famous thing about the crafty skill was its weirdness. When the pubic region was successfully divided, she had a feeling that the elixir matrix could only last for 1 year at most. That was to say, in this year, she must find a new container to hold the divine thunder, or directly find the way to integrate the thunder punishment. Otherwise, once the crafty skill failed, she would fall into a long-term chaos of the divine thunder. All her strength would be used to suppress the divine thunder. It would be extremely difficult to deal with the crisis of the Life Palace. However, no matter which of these 2 methods it was, they were not simple. The Gungjin Pagoda, Su Li's eyes flashed. She must succeed as soon as possible. Her original plan was to awaken the mark of Golden Thunder first, and then get close to the divine thunder of metal through Xiangnan. But the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. The difficulty of integrating the divine thunder was beyond her imagination. Besides, Xiangnan was unusual. It was unknown whether he could get close to the divine thunder of metal by forcing her to abdicate. "Ling Li, do me a favor," Su Li suddenly said. Ling Li was stunned. He was about to mention the reincarnation mirror. But when he saw Su Jiuzhou's pure black eyes, which were similar to Li's on her pale face, his heart softened. "Go ahead." In the next few days, Shuizhen was surprised to see that Ling San left the side hall and began to wander in the sect. With the identity of Su Qingshui's attendant, almost 90% of the places in the holy sect of Wind Thunder were unimpeded. "Is this blockhead enlightened?" Shuizhen murmured and didn't think too much. Recently, she was obsessed with making snacks for His Highness. Every time she heard His Highness's praise, her heart was as sweet as honey. At first, the disciples of the holy sect of Wind Thunder felt strange. But later, they found that Ling San really just wandered around and didn't affect other disciples' practice. So, they let him wander around. But no one noticed that every place he stopped would pass through the Gungjin Pagoda, if connected. In the empty mountain forest, Ling Li's divine awareness swept around for a moment. He turned his palm, and a pure white jade slip appeared in his palm. The last one. According to Su Jiuzhou's instructions, he changed his palms for a moment and put the pure white jade slip into the ground. After doing this, Ling Li turned around and walked back as if he had done nothing, but his mind was active. The ancient prohibition is indeed in my bloodline inheritance, but it is not detailed. I didn't expect that Su Jiuzhou would know such an unpopular secret skill. Is she a disciple of an old monster living in the last era? Or I? Ling Li frowned. It seemed that he didn't want to think about it and left quickly. In the blink of an eye, the holy sect of Wind Thunder was quiet and peaceful. Shuizhen didn't know why she was so sleepy today and went to bed early. The rest of the handymen also returned to the resting place. After meditating for a while, they fell asleep unconsciously. In the night, the cold wind blew Su Li's robe with thunder pattern. Ling Li stood beside her and stared at her profile. He said in a deep voice, "Are you ready to take action?" "Yes," Su Li responded. She looked at the direction of the Gungjin Pagoda with her dark eyes, and the black light flickered in her eyes. "You stay in the hall. If something happens, help me to protect Shuizhen and others." Ling Li was stunned and kept silent for a moment. He said, "Don't worry about Shuizhen and others. And I was wrong to quarrel with you a few days ago. I apologize to you for that." It was Su Li's turn to be stunned, but she quickly came to herself, turned around uncomfortably, and flew away. The mountain peak where the Gungjin Pagoda was located was completely silent. In the invisible underground, the pure white jade talisman was rapidly moving, leaving behind specks of white light that rose up under the moonlight, gradually covering the entire mountain peak. Xianghua sat alone on the first floor of the Gungjin Pagoda. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and frowned at the cold moonlight outside the pagoda. Nothing had changed, but he always felt a little uncomfortable. He got up and opened the door of the Gingjin Pagoda. When he was about to go out and have a look, a white palm appeared out of nowhere and pressed against the door. You! When Xiang Hua saw Su Li, his pupils suddenly shrank. When he was about to pinch the incantation to control the Gingjin Pagoda, he saw Su Li smile. Countless black runes poured into his body, and he couldn't move in the blink of an eye. Grand Elder Hua, it seems that you have noticed it long ago. Su Li strolled into the Gingjin Pagoda as if she was back home. She looked at Xiang Hua with ease. You seem to be able to keep your sanity. Unlike the Grand Elder of Mei sect who is hopeless, the poisonous substitute insect didn't corrode you deeply? Chapter 6:25. You can search Poisonous Wife in Baidu. You can search for the latest chapter. Judging from your expression, I should be right. Su Li smiled. Xiang Hua, do you think it's better to become a puppet of the Life Palace? Or do you want to get rid of the poisonous substitute insect and become a free man again? Xiang Hua opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but then he thought of something. A look of horror flashed across his face, and he didn't say a word. The poisonous substitute insect prevents you from leaking the secret. Su Li took a chair in front of Xiang Hua and sat down. She looked calm and indifferent. To be honest, I'm not sure if I can isolate the influence of the poisonous substitute insect, but you can have a try. Although the price of trying is likely to be your life, in your heart, your life should have already entered the countdown. So, are you willing to gamble? Or continue to wait for death? Su Li's words seemed to hit the bottom of Xiang Hua's heart, which made him struggle. After a moment, he seemed to make a decision, and his eyes became firm. Have you really used the means? Are you lying to me? Su Li raised her hand and looked at her nails. She said without raising her head, do you think Ling San has been running around in the sect these days? Xiang Hua was shocked when he heard this. Of course, he knew who Ling San was. The rumor that the holy girl, Qing Shui, recruited a boy pet as soon as she set up the mountain spread like wildfire in the sect. Of course, he had heard of it, but until now, he understood Su Jiuzhou's intention. This woman was so far-sighted that ordinary people couldn't compare with her. It was too terrible, perhaps because of this wonderful misunderstanding. Xiang Hua inexplicably had a little confidence in Su Li. He took a deep breath and tried to say, with a trembling voice, Bai Ming. Time seemed to be stagnant. After Xiang Hua was nervous for a few seconds, he was surprised to find that it really didn't hurt. At the beginning, when he was eroded by the poisonous substitute insect, he also wanted to confess. But even if he thought of the name of Fate Ancestor, he would feel pain in his awareness see, and even heard the sound of breaking. In desperation, he could only choose to compromise. But now he said the name above board, and there was no problem at all? Su Li looked at Xiang Hua's happy face thoughtfully. She knew nothing about the poisonous substitute, but Bai Ming was good at the skill of fate. She guessed that the poisonous substitute was probably mixed with the skill of fate. As long as the Tower of Gingjin was temporarily sealed by the Forbidden Heaven, Bai Ming would not be able to detect the change of Xiang Hua. Now that he had tested it, it was as he had expected. However, just one example could not prove anything. He still needed to verify it further. Su Jiuzhou, you really deserve to be the Lord of Ni sect. No one has ever successfully countered Bai Ming's spell, but you have broken this rule. Xiang Hua's expression returned to normal, revealing a sincere expression. Although your method is very effective, this old man is not sure how long it will last. I'll tell you everything you want to know. Su Li's eyes flashed. How did you get hit? I don't know either. Xiang Hua's face was full of pain. I only remember that one night 1,000 years ago, I suddenly felt very tired. Practitioners rarely feel tired unless they are in a big battle. I felt something was wrong at that time, but I couldn't resist the sleepiness and fell asleep. When I woke up, nothing changed. But later, when some orders kept coming to my mind, I realized that I was controlled by the Fate Ancestor. Su Li nodded gently and suddenly asked, that Qingqing is also a member of the Fate Palace? Xiang Hua was surprised and immediately admitted yes. But I haven't told anyone about this. How did you guess it? It's not hard to guess. Su Li looked at Xianghua with a smile. In my opinion, your anger is too fake. Even if your sister Xiang Nan controls the magic treasure of divine thunder of fire, you don't even try it and leave directly. This is not like the reaction of losing a precious disciple, but more like dealing with a task. Xianghua was stunned and couldn't help but wonder if his acting was really bad. But his sister was indeed deceived. As the saying goes, the onlooker sees the game clearly. Su Li stared at Xianghua. Your sister didn't notice it, but one day, your head will explode like the Grand Elder of Charm Sect. A worm will crawl out of it and clamor in front of Xiangnan. Can you accept such a picture? Xianghua's face was pale, and he shook his head repeatedly. No. Then the next step is simple. Su Li smiled and squinted her eyes. She pointed to the door leading to the upper level of the Gungjin Pagoda. If I leave the divine thunder of metal with you, it will be taken away by Ming sooner or later. It's better to give it to me. Maybe I will kill him before you completely lose your mind. At that time, the poisonous substitute insect will laugh, and you can save your life. Xianghua's face darkened. He didn't doubt Su Jiuzhou's ability. If Su Jiuzhou was given more time, this evildoer might really kill Bai Ming. But what if the poisonous substitute insect took him to be buried with Bai Ming after Bai Ming died? This question turned in Xianghua's mind several times, but he didn't ask it in the end. No matter what the result was, it wouldn't be worse than now. Thinking of this, Xianghua's face flashed with determination. With a move of his heart, the restriction leading to the upper level disappeared. Su Li, who thought she needed to talk more, was surprised for a moment and nodded. Thank you, but I have to trouble Grand Elder Hua to stay here for a while. When I get the divine thunder of metal, I will set you free. No. Someone will definitely come to the Gungjin Pagoda tomorrow. At that time, I will be exposed. Xianghua shouted, but Su Jiuzhou disappeared directly in the door as if she didn't hear it, leaving Xianghua frozen in place like a sculpture. Passing through the door, Su Li quickly came to the place where the divine thunder of metal was stored. Gold was mainly sharp. Therefore, the body of the divine thunder of metal stored in the Gungjin Pagoda was a sword. Tut, the body of the divine thunder depends on the spirit's own will, and the body of the divine thunder of metal as a sword is even rarer. Master, you have picked up a treasure again. Looking at the body of the golden sword of divine thunder, Black Lotus couldn't help but show up and say, it's a pity that this thunder spirit was also broken up and lost its own consciousness. Otherwise, its power is comparable to the most precious treasure. Sister, I'll start now. Su Bai didn't need Su Li to call in this time. He directly showed his body and sank into the communication with the divine thunder of metal. The gold and green reflected each other, shining on Su Li's white face, bright and dark. She looked at the divine thunder of metal in silence, and no one knew what she was thinking. Time passed gradually. Xianghua couldn't move his body and could only watch the sky outside gradually turn white. It was dawn. If an elder or a disciple came to visit, he and Su Jiuzhou would immediately be exposed. He didn't know whether Su Jiuzhou's trick last night was still there. If it was still there, he could confess to Xiaonan, and she would not continue to be disappointed. While Xiangnan was thinking, he suddenly heard something in his ear. He turned his eyes reluctantly and saw Su Li coming out of the door. She stretched out her hand and pointed at him from a distance, and his body immediately returned to normal. I'm leaving first. You'd better cover here in the Gungjin Pagoda, in case you can't answer when Grand Elder Xiangnan asks. After saying that, Su Li's figure flashed and disappeared. Xianghua's eyes widened, and he hurriedly came to the top of the Gungjin Pagoda. Seeing that the altar was empty and the shadow of the divine sword was gone, he was dumbfounded. Divine thunder of metal. The most rebellious divine thunder of metal was taken away by Su Jiuzhou. Why did all the holy children and holy girls who wanted to integrate divine thunder of metal in the past fail? But why did Su Jiuzhou seem to do it effortlessly? It's only been 2 hours. Xianghua couldn't help but sigh. Suddenly, his body shook, and he looked shocked. It only took Su Jiuzhou 2 hours to take away divine thunder of metal. Before that, she had been to the place of divine thunder of fire. Didn't it mean in the Holy Girl Mount? Ling Li just sensed Su Li's pneuma and saw a white shadow flash into the adytum and slam the door. Su Jiuzhou, he couldn't help but look worried. When divine thunder and fire thunder merged into one, the pain caused by the fiery collision of the two made him shudder with fear. But Su Jiuzhou did it without hesitation. What was driving her? Why did she have to do it to this extent? Master, the legend about divine thunder of 5 elements is too vague. Why do you have to gather all the divine thunder? Do you think you can deal with Fate Ancestor after gathering all the divine thunder of 5 elements? Seeing Su Li's face getting paler, Black Lotus couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. Although her pubic region was protected by the crafty skill, the torture brought by the divine thunder when it entered her body was not a little bit. No reason. Su Li slowly breathed out a mouthful of turbid air, and her eyes were dark and deep. She just had an intuition that if there was no divine thunder of 5 elements, she would be in danger. Whether in the previous life or this life, she had always been very cautious. Even if the divine thunder of 5 elements brought her more disadvantages than advantages, she always felt that it was right to do so. Seeing Su Li fall silent after saying these words, Black Lotus was speechless for a while. Then he didn't have the heart to disturb her to heal the burns in her body, so he fell silent. A few days later, Su Li's face recovered a little ruddy, and she looked no different from usual. Then she went out of practice. Even with her physical body, the recovery of the burns left by the 3 kinds of divine thunder was obviously slow. However, she didn't have so much time to wait for recovery. Today, she found Xiang Nan and was ready to leave the holy sect of Wind Thunder. Grand Elder, the mark of fire and thunder hasn't been awakened for a long time. I want to go out to practice for a period of time. Seeing Su Li's firm face, Xiangnan couldn't help but nod. Well, you have been a casual practitioner for the past 700 years. I don't need to remind you of the dangers outside. Remember to go back to the sect after a period of time. Su Li nodded and was silent for a moment. Suddenly, she said, I will bring hope to the holy sect of Wind Thunder. Xiangnan was stunned, and then he couldn't help laughing. He said in a warm voice, I see. Go ahead. Okay. Su Li responded and left without looking back. In the Mount Holy Girl, Shuizhen looked at Su Li with red eyes. Your Highness, do you really want to go out to practice? Su Li touched her head, and her usually indifferent eyes looked a little gentle. When I am not here, you have to be cautious and practice more. Although the food is good, it can't bring you confidence. Do you understand? It was the first time for Shuizhen to hear someone exhort her like this. She couldn't stop crying. Su Li sighed softly and turned to fly away. Ling Li's eyes flashed, and he immediately followed her. Shuizhen, who was still crying, didn't see this scene. Junior sister apprentice Qing Shui, are you going down the mountain now? Ban Qian asked and stopped Su Li in front of the mountain gate. Then he glanced at Ling Li in surprise and said, Ling San is going too? Senior fellow apprentice, I can't think of a way to deal with the Fate sect if I stay in the sect. Su Li nodded and said with a smile, maybe you should go out for a walk. Maybe you can gain something. Ban Qian was upset. Why did junior sister apprentice Qing Shui's words seem to imply something? But when he thought about it carefully, there seemed to be nothing. That's all. Senior fellow apprentice. See you in the future. Su Li stepped around Ban Qian, who was still in a daze, and threw the Identity Jade token on the big tactical matrix for the protection of the mountain. The big tactical matrix rippled and opened a vortex. The moment Su Li was about to step in, her face suddenly changed slightly. No, this is not the door to go out. Ling Li also noticed something wrong. He shouted coldly and was about to pull Su Li back quickly. But at this moment, the vortex suddenly buzzed and an irresistible strong suction came out. Su Li and Ban Qian, who was still in a daze, were sucked into it and disappeared. Chapter 626. You can search Poisonous Wife in Baidu. Search for the latest chapter. In the darkness and silence, there was an echo. Little friend, you took 2 divine thunders of our sect. It's not right to leave, is it? As soon as Ban Xian came to his senses, he heard an old voice in his ears. He was at a loss. Took 2 divine thunders? Little friend? Who was he talking about? Su Qingshui. He suddenly realized something and turned around. He saw his junior sister apprentice, Su Qingshui, and Ling San looking around with a dignified face. After a while, he saw Su Qingshui slightly raised her eyebrows and showed a familiar smile that he had seen many times in Shengxian Mountain. Senior, are you Thunder Ancestors? Ban Xian widened his eyes and swallowed. The scenes of him getting along with Su Qingshui in Holy Sect of Wind Thunder flashed in his mind, and he almost cried out. Su Jiuzhou, it's fine if you want to kidnap me, but you don't even want to let go of my sect's 2 divine thunders. At this moment, Ban Xian, who was full of grief and indignation, even subconsciously ignored the name of Thunder Ancestor. Your bone age is less than 100. You deserve to be the top evildoer in this era. In the darkness, an illusory figure slowly floated over. Su Li couldn't help but stare. Remnant soul? If I were not a remnant soul, how could you speak in front of me intact? The illusory figure floated closer. When Su Li saw his face, her pupils suddenly shrank, and she blurted out, Song Lei? The Thunder Ancestor's body shook when he heard this, and then he relaxed. It seems like you've seen my brother. Where is he hiding? Su Li was silent for a moment and said, Jiuzhou region, Blackstone Forest. His remnant soul has dissipated. I have not found a suitable heir for the inheritance of Song Lei. It turns out that he is there. Thunder Ancestor sighed. Well, I am already a cripple. In the Forgotten Era, it is meaningless to haggle over gratitude and resentment. It's a pity that I can't see him. Thunder Ancestor said, and turned his eyes to Ling Li. Ling Li's face suddenly changed slightly. He felt that he was seen through and couldn't hide any secrets. You are? The light in Lei Zhu's eyes faded, and he suddenly lost his calm. He looked at Ling Li in surprise and doubt, and murmured, It turns out that the rumor is true. Ling Qingshui, you are really selfish. Ling Li was slightly shocked. He opened his mouth but didn't know what to ask. You know Ling Qingshui. Su Li's eyes flashed. She turned to look at Ban Xian, who was at a loss and confused, and continued, Then you should know a lot about Bai Mo, White Demon. What a nostalgic name. The Thunder Ancestor looked back at Su Li. However, what is more surprising is that you, at such a young age, actually know what happened in that era. Is this the reason why you stole my sect's divine lightning? Not bad. Su Li removed the all-spirits tactics gracefully and admitted, My name is Su Jiuzhou. If you've been paying attention to the Wind Thunder Saints sect, you should know me. An I sect. I have heard of it. The Lightning Ancestor nodded and waved his hand to set up a table of wine. Sit down. It seems we can have a chat. I thought that an I sect was just a flash in the pan. But when I saw you, I suddenly became a little interested in it. Su Li sat opposite the Thunder Ancestor, according to his words. Ling Li hesitated and sat next to her. Ban Xian was still standing there like a sculpture. You want to use the divine lightning of the 5 elements to deal with Bai Mo. I have thought of this method in the past. The Thunder Ancestor sighed. Even I have gathered all the divine lightning of the 5 elements, but I am still not the opponent of the natural law in Bai Mo's hand. The divine lightning of the 5 elements is still a little weaker than the thunder of destruction. Su Li was shocked. Couldn't it work? But the Thunder Ancestor stared at Su Li. After I died, my remnant soul hid in this ownerless space and thought about the failure of that year day after day. But I had an idea. Have you ever heard of the Thunder of Tranquility? Su Li frowned and then shook her head. Ling Li recalled and suddenly said, Senior, do you mean the fusion of the 5 elements? The Thunder Ancestor nodded with a smile and looked at Ling Li with kindness as an elder. It seems that you have inherited his memory. the descendants of immortals are really different. The so-called thunder of tranquility is the thunder method that only immortals can master. The thunder ancestor didn't seem to want to say more about Ling Qingshui. He quickly returned to the original topic and explained to Su Li, I see that your physical body has reached the limit of human beings, so I tell you the thunder of tranquility. Otherwise, for the weak human clan, the fusion of the divine lightning is tantamount to suicide. The so-called thunder of tranquility is the perfect fusion of the 5 kinds of divine lightning of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth into one, as this kid said. In this way, the power can be greatly increased and surpass the natural law of this world. Su Li frowned. Then, how to fuse them? There is a treasure in Ziyun House called Perfect Chakra. This treasure can transform the 5 elements. If you can get the right to control it, maybe you can have a try. The Thunder Ancestor's tone became cautious when he said this, but this method is just my idea. Whether it can be fused is still a variable. If it fails, Su Li's pupil shrank. Even the great emperor couldn't bear the destructive power of the 5 elements. She took a deep breath and took out the thunder seed of earth. Senior, is there any way to activate this thunder seed? Do you really want to try? The thunder seed looked at Su Li in surprise, and then smiled again. Yes, if I were your age, I would never be afraid of trying. There are many ways to activate the thunder seed of earth, but not many of them can be used in a short time. I see that the 3 thunders in your body are clearly separated. It probably won't last long, right? Su Li nodded slightly. Senior, you have sharp eyes. I admire you. There are only a few months left, and I don't have time to waste. Ling Li was so shocked that the cup in his hand trembled. There were not 2 kinds of divine lightning in Su Jiuzhou's body, but 3. She actually didn't show the slightest bit of pain and torture. But you still lack the divine lightning of wood. The Thunder Ancestor looked at the thunder seed in his hand and couldn't help but frown. This thunder seed was extremely weak and troublesome. Old Ancestor, Su Jiuzhou, what she lacks most is the divine lightning of wood. Ban Qian finally managed to regain his senses and opened his mouth to speak. Oh! The illusory face of the Thunder Ancestor showed a surprised expression. Does it mean that as long as this thunder seed is activated, you will gather all the divine lightning of 5 elements, and you can immediately go to Ziyun House to have a try? Su Li nodded. I won't do things that I'm not sure about. The original plan was to find the old ancestor of Tianqing Valley to get the method to activate it. Since I can meet you, it's obviously better. Oh, Bai Xiao? That old guy likes to collect secrets, and he really has the method to activate the Thunder Seed. But his method is not suitable for you. The Thunder Ancestor looked at Su Li, and his eyes had changed from the initial accusation and indifference to gentle and intimate, as if he was instructing his own junior. The so-called fire gives birth to earth. If you want to speed up the activation of the Thunder Seed of Earth, you can put it in the Fire Thunder. I will teach you a thunder method, which can turn the Thunder Seed of Earth into Thunder Fire within 3 days, but it will also shorten its lifespan, which can only last for 1 year. However, if you try the method to integrate the 5 elements, 1 year is enough. As he said, the Thunder Ancestor pointed between his eyebrows and pulled out an illusory text from it. The text fell into the palm of the Thunder Ancestor and turned into a jade slip in the blink of an eye. All the details are on the jade slip. You can figure it out repeatedly. Thank you, Thunder Ancestor. Su Li nodded and took it. Then she moved her mind, and the inheritance jade slip in Song Lei's cave floated out. This thing can be regarded as returning to its original owner. Song Lei. The indifferent old eyes of the Thunder Ancestor showed a complex expression. Then he sighed softly and threw the jade slip into Ban Qian's arms. Leave his things in the Wind Thunder sect and wait for the destined person. My broken body can't last long. Ban Qian caught it in a hurry, and then responded respectfully. Yes, old ancestor. I will give this thing to Grand Elder Nan. Ho-ho, you're also a good boy. The Thunder Ancestor's eyes were warm, and he suddenly transmitted the sound. In today's chaotic world, You don't have to stick to the formalities. The Life Palace is in conflict, and it's not the time to hesitate. If Su Jojo really has the divine thunder of wood, why don't you choose to follow her for a period of time? Your talent in which should not be buried. If you leave, I will explain to your master and others. Don't worry. Ban Qian's body shook slightly, and a strange and warm feeling suddenly rose in his heart. The words of the Thunder Ancestor were like a key, unlocking the shackles in his heart. Suddenly, his heart was full of strength. Su Li saw that the Thunder Ancestor was transmitting the sound to Ban Qian, but she did not disturb him. She just rubbed the jade slip in her hand and waited quietly. When the Thunder Ancestor shifted his gaze to her again, she hesitated again and finally chose to transmit the sound. How much does the Thunder Ancestor know about the poisonous substitute insect? The eyes of the Thunder Ancestor changed, as if he saw the scene of the Great War between the righteous and the evil in those years. Baemo infiltrated the practitioners in our camp with the poisonous substitute insect. At first, we were unprepared, and many companions rebelled, leading to a period of chaos that lasted for hundreds of years. Countless practitioners died innocently. Now tens of thousands of years have passed, and by Mo's infiltration should be stronger. Su Li nodded, and then transmitted the sound. Xianghua was also poisoned by the poisonous substitute insect. The Thunder Ancestor's gentle face finally changed. He forgot to transmit the sound and blurted out, "You mean Hua?" Ling Li and Ban Qian watched the two talking in riddles, and they were both at a loss. Ban Qian was careless, and he didn't listen to them if he didn't understand. At this moment, his mind was completely on Ling Li. This Ling San was obviously a fake name. Although the old ancestor's attitude towards him was not right, he could also see that Ling San's background was definitely not worse than Su Jojo's. But this person actually became Su Jojo's attendant in their sect for half a month? Even he did not refute when others called him a boy toy? What's the relationship between him and Su Jojo? Ban Qian was lost in thought, but the Thunder Ancestor's face was completely gloomy, and his illusory body began to flash. Baemo, how dare you kill my son? Thunder Ancestor, calm down. Grand Elder Hua is still conscious, and he is not poisoned by the poisonous substitute insect. Does Thunder Ancestor have a way to prevent and cure the poisonous substitute insect? Su Li comforted him. The Thunder Ancestor's state of mind was also strong, so he calmed down quickly and said, "There is no invincible method in this world, and the poisonous substitute insect naturally has its defects. I heard that the poisonous substitute insect needs the flesh and blood of boys and girls to refine successfully. It is originally an evil thing, and the thunder method of our holy sect of Wind Thunder can best restrain it. But under the Fate Ancestor's fate skill, the poisonous substitute insect was transformed into the poisonous substitute insect. After this defect was hidden, the thunder method could no longer work. Back then, we spent hundreds of years trying to restrain it. Later, Qing Shui's circle unexpectedly found that the star fate skill did great harm to the poisonous substitute life insect. So, they asked Bai Xiu to produce a large amount of star divine water to restrain the attack of the poisonous substitute life insect. Su Li's eyes flashed. Since there is divine star water, why is there still the poisonous substitute insect now? Divine star water is also transformed by the fate skill, and its effect is closely related to fate. The Thunder Ancestor's eyes were gloomy. It must be that Baemo thought of a way to weaken the fate of the whole Qing Shui circle and forced it on himself. Even with the protection of the heavenly star divine water, there are still unlucky people who fall prey to it. Weaken the fate of a circle? Ling Li frowned and said, "Even if Baemo is powerful, how can he weaken?" Ling Li suddenly stopped in the middle of his words, and his pupils shrank. Chapter 6:27. You can search for Poisonous Wife in Baidu search for the latest chapter. Looks like you've already thought of it. Lei Zhu looked at Ling Li's face and said in a deep tone, "It is the holy girl Su Li. She shouldn't exist in the world." Fate Ancestor calculated the right time, place, and people in advance and forced her to be born in Qingshui's circle. As soon as she appeared, she took away nearly half of the luck of this circle. Fortunately, she died 1,000 years ago. Otherwise, if she left Reincarnation Mirror and was used by Fate Ancestor again, the consequences would be unimaginable. Speaking of this, Thunder Ancestor sighed softly, but after his death, his fate was buried with him. The fate of Qingshui's circle was permanently reduced, and the purpose of Fate Ancestor was achieved. So that's how it is. Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly. It was the first time for her to hear this argument, but it was indeed reasonable. Ling Li stared at the Thunder Ancestor with cold eyes like a blade. He unconsciously clenched his fists in his sleeves and said angrily, "Su Li shouldn't exist in the world? What did she do wrong? She obviously didn't do anything." Van Qian was surprised by Ling Li's sudden excitement. He suddenly thought of a person and looked at Ling Li, who was still angry. "Ling-san, could it be?" That's the truth." Seeing Ling Li's reaction, Thunder Master didn't feel strange. He saw through Ling Li's disguise at a glance. Ling Qingshui's green puppet mask was powerful, but Ling Li obviously didn't practice it well. But Lei Zhu's tone changed, and he sighed with emotion. Su Li didn't do anything wrong. She even made great contributions. If she hadn't chosen to perish in the reincarnation mirror, the cultivation world would have probably become the back garden of Fate Ancestor. Ling Li was silent, and his eyes were bloodshot. But it didn't take long for all kinds of complex anger in his heart to subside, because he knew that Su Li could reincarnate, and it would not take long for him to get Su Li's identity in this life from the reincarnation mirror in Su Jiuzhou's hands. In that case, Senior Fate Ancestor, Su Li's eyes were bright. If the holy girl's fate does not dissipate, and someone obtains it and establishes a sect based on it, inviting holy sects to join, and then uses the divine water of stars, can all the substitute life poisonous insect that has not yet matured be forced out of the body? Lei Zhu's eyes suddenly lit up, and he stared at Su Li as if he wanted to see through her. But no matter how he looked, Su Li was like a mist. He couldn't see her clearly. "Little friend, if your assumption is correct." His tone softened. "It's not impossible." Lei Ancestor of the Thunder. Su Li's eyes were full of smiles. At this moment, NI sect still has the luck contained in the Tianjiao list. Maybe the effect is surprisingly good. Lei of Li Su. Li, Shi Li. Thunder Ancestor laughed with a red face. "However, since you have taken the two divine thunders, the holy sect of Wind Thunder no longer has the divine thunders, and it exists in name only. So what if it is under the jurisdiction of NI sect from now on?" Speaking of this, he took a meaningful look at Ling Li. "I will transmit the sound to Xiang Nan to explain the matter. Do we need to conceal the heavenly secrets?" Su Li leaned on the stone chair and crossed her hands on her knees. "The change of fate may be immediate, and Fate Ancestor will notice it immediately. I'm not talented, but I have learned the Heaven Forbidden technique, so I can fool you for a while." "Heaven Forbidden Land?" The Thunder Ancestor's eyes widened, and his smile grew even brighter. "You also convinced the Holy Snow sect?" "No, there's another reason." Su Li didn't want to say more, and the Thunder Ancestor didn't ask more. He just said, "Our Wind Thunder sect has been in Qingshui's circle for tens of thousands of years. How can we not have any foundation? We don't need to bother you to hide the secrets of heaven." At this point, the Lightning Ancestor closed his eyes. Seeing this, Su Li also closed her eyes to rest and waited quietly. Xiang Nan was in seclusion when a voice transmission suddenly came. "Nanner, are you there?" Hearing this extremely familiar voice, Xiang Nan's body trembled violently. He immediately woke up and opened his eyes. "Foster father?" "Yes, it's me." The voice of the Thunder Ancestor was a little tired. "My remnant soul body is against the secrets of heaven, so it's not appropriate to say more. This transmission is only for one thing. From now on, our Wind Thunder sect will belong to Ni sect, and Ni sect will be our master. Don't ask more questions. You go to the Gungjin Pagoda immediately and observe Hua Er's reaction. Belong to Ni sect? Xiangnan couldn't help but be shocked. But her foster father was the sky for her. So even if she was full of doubts, she immediately set off for the Gungjin Pagoda. At the same time, the top of the Gungjin Pagoda suddenly emitted a golden light, which covered the entire Wind Thunder sect in a few seconds. Xiang Hua, who saw this scene, couldn't help but be stunned. What happened? Suddenly, Xiang Hua felt nauseous, as if something was stirring in his throat. He scratched his itchy throat, and a moment later, a long white worm came out with a retch sound. The long worm seemed to be in great pain. It twisted violently on the ground for a moment, and let out a scream. Then it burst into a cloud of blood mist and drifted away. Xianghua looked at this scene dully. After a moment, he suddenly reacted and sensed that his awareness sea had regained its freedom. He was immediately surprised and delighted. The poisonous substitute insect is dead. Eldest brother, Xiang Nan, who witnessed the whole process at the door, swallowed hard and said bitterly, "What's going on? Alas, it's a long story." Xianghua sighed and asked, "Why are you here?" "It's my foster father." Xiang Nan immediately repeated the order of the Thunder Ancestor. Xianghua, who knew more inside information, immediately understood that his foster father's consciousness was still there, and he met with Su Jiuzhou. Although he didn't understand the principle, as long as the sect belonged to Ni sect, it seemed that they could get rid of the poisonous substitute insect. "Nan, don't ask so much. My foster father did the right thing." Xianghua closed the gate of the Gungjin Pagoda and poured out all the sufferings of these years. Xiang Nan knew that his eldest brother had been controlled by the Fate Palace, and he even almost lost his mind and became a puppet. Fate Ancestor. Xiang Nan's eyes were burning with anger. "We choose to live in peace, but Fate Ancestor won't. As long as the Fate Palace is not eliminated, there will be no peace. Since my foster father asked us to belong to Ni sect, then we will fight. We won't stop until one of us dies." Xianghua's eyes were full of killing intent. "We won't stop until one of us dies." In the small, ownerless world, the Thunder Ancestor opened his eyes and looked at Su Li, who was still resting with her eyes closed. He smiled with relief. The new generation surpassed the old one. The nemesis of the Fate Ancestor appeared, and it was time for him to withdraw from the stage of history. It seems that Senior Thunder Ancestor has received satisfactory results. Su Li opened her eyes, and her eyes were full of divine light. "I wonder if I can stay here for 3 days." "Oh, do you want to activate the seed of Earth Thunder here?" The Thunder Ancestor raised his white eyebrows and immediately said with a smile, "Of course. Now this place is also yours, and I am the guest. You can stay as long as you want. It happens that I am here, and you can activate the seed of Earth Thunder, which will help you." "Senior Thunder Ancestor, you are too serious." Su Li smiled sweetly. "I don't have the ambition to unify the world. How troublesome is it? As long as the Fate Ancestor is killed, Ni sect is still the Ni sect in Jiuzhou region." The Thunder Ancestor smiled without saying a word. Time would prove this sentence. In the next 3 days, Su Li practiced in isolation, and Ban Qian left happily. Now the entire holy sect of Wind Thunder sect belonged to Ni sect, and he didn't need to worry about it anymore. In the ownerless space, only the Thunder Ancestor and Ling Li were left alone. Ling Li's state of mind had calmed down at this moment. He glanced at the dark place where Su Li practiced in isolation. After a moment of silence, he suddenly asked, "Senior Thunder Ancestor, why do you say that? Ling Qingshui is selfish?" The Thunder Ancestor still had a smile on his face, but the smile suddenly faded. He didn't answer but asked, "How much do you know about him?" Ling Li shook his head and said in a low voice, "I know nothing." His inheritance was only about practice, and he had no impression of memory. His understanding of Ling Qingshui was still limited to what he heard and saw at the end of the divine awareness. I only know that my father is not the lord of Xingtian Shrine, but a lord of this realm named Ling Qingshui. That's all. The lightning ancestor let out a long sigh. If I were to tell you that the Great War back then was largely because of you, what would you think? Ling Li's eyes changed. Why do you say that? Su Jiuzhou's refining has just begun, and I still have time. Well, I'll tell you. The thunder ancestor summoned a stone chair and sat down again. His turbid eyes were dim. I swore that if I met you, I would definitely kill you to comfort the souls of my old friends who died in the war. But this information has long faded with my death. You were just a baby in swaddling clothes at that time, so it's not your fault. Ling Li took a light breath and sat beside the thunder ancestor. He said in a deep voice, I'd like to hear the details. In fact, for Qingshui's circle, both your father and Bai Mo are outsiders. The words of the thunder ancestor were earth-shattering, which made Ling Li stop breathing. Ling Qingshui was not from Qingshui's circle. Seeing Ling Li's reaction, the thunder ancestor couldn't help but smile and continued. But you were born in Qingshui's circle. Your mother was the lord of Wanling Palace, and then disappeared. Wanling Palace? Ling Li's thoughts were a little chaotic, but it didn't prevent him from asking. I know that before Qingshui calendar, it was the Wanling calendar. Yes. The thunder ancestor's eyes flashed with respect. Wanling Palace once ruled this circle for hundreds of thousands of years, and it was the real overlord. Later, the whole palace disappeared for no reason. I suspect that it has something to do with your father. It's just that the secret has passed for tens of thousands of years, and no one knows the reason. Seeing Ling Li fall into silence, the thunder ancestor continued. After Bai Mo appeared, he slaughtered several big regions as soon as he appeared. One of them was the prefecture next to Jiuzhou region. Ling Qingshui was the lord of Qingshui's circle at that time, so he naturally had to take the responsibility of protecting Qingshui's circle. At that time, he ordered all sects in the world to merge into Qingshui Palace and form a crusade army to destroy the Palace of Demons. But Bai Mo had already escaped, and no one knew where he was hiding. At that time, Wanling Palace disappeared, and your mother disappeared. Ling Qingshui took you alone and chased after Bai Mo. But later, I don't know what evil method Bai Mo used, and he bewitched the natural law of this circle to deal with Ling Qingshui. Speaking of this, the thunder ancestor's face darkened. At that time, we knew that Ling Qingshui was not a person of this circle. So Bai Mo took the opportunity to kill Ling Qingshui with the thunder of destruction. But Ling Qingshui was an immortal after all. Even if he didn't have the thunder of tranquility, the thunder of destruction could only hurt him, but not kill him. That battle shattered the mountains and rivers, and darkened the sky and the earth. In the end, it ended with both sides suffering losses. Chapter 628. You can search Poisonous Wife in Baidu. Search for the latest chapter. And then, Ling Li couldn't help but ask, why didn't you pursue White Demon when he was injured? After White Demon was injured, he disappeared. No one knows where he is hiding. Thunder Ancestor's voice was very low. At that time, your father was seriously injured, and it was difficult to heal because of the malice of natural law in this circle. At that time, you were just born, and you were also hostile to natural law. You were in danger of dying immediately. Speaking of this, Thunder Ancestor slowed down his tone and stared at Ling Li. Immortals do have incredible means to seal you for a long time. You will stay at 1 year old forever until the seal loses its effectiveness due to time. Time is a sharp weapon that even natural law can't resist. As long as the time is long enough, your existence will be forgotten by natural law, and there will be no danger of dying. But this skill is against nature. The effect only has a great impact on Ling Qingshui's strength, and may even affect the war. At that time, Ling Qingshui was in a dilemma. He could only choose between Qingshui's circle and you. No one knew his situation at that time. Now it seems that he chose you. Ling Li's eyes were sore, as if he could see the indomitable man in those days. After his wife suddenly disappeared, he still had to fight desperately with White Demon. After being seriously injured, he gently picked him up with a tender face. After sealing him, he resolutely left. It turned out that the Lord of Xingtian Shrine was just a vampire built by a pile of lies. It turned out that his father had always loved him and could even let everyone down for him. Later, White Demon hid behind the scenes and made the poisonous substitute, which made the coalition of Qingshui Palace fall apart instantly. Qingshui's circle began to be in chaos for hundreds of years. After the divine water of stars was made, the chaos subsided. But at that time, Qingshui's circle was already in misery and suffering. Countless cultivation inheritances were destroyed, which led to the fault of cultivation methods. But the fault at that time was not as serious as it is now. White Demon is very patient. Even though he has the advantage, he doesn't rush for instant benefits. He wasted 1,000 years of your father's life. When your father's injuries worsened, even we could sense his otherworldly bloodline, and the apocalyptic thunder tribulation descended. In one night, the Green Water Palace was destroyed, but at that time, your father had already moved all his clansmen away. The heavenly axiom was furious and poured all its anger on your father. At that time, your father's strength was less than 1/100th of his original strength. Coupled with the suppression of the otherworld, how could he be a match for the heavenly axiom? The Thunder Ancestor didn't say anything else. He found that Ling Li's eyes were red. The father and son, separated for tens of thousands of years, didn't know each other's hearts until today. Back then, he was still young and had not adopted Xianghua and Xiangnan. Naturally, he hated Ling Qingshui's actions. But now, he had tasted what it was like to be a father. How could he not know Ling Qingshui's hardship and sadness? Although he was strong enough to be above the whole world, he was still a poor man. Where are my father's remains? It was the first time for him to call Ling Qingshui father, but he was not unaccustomed to it at all. He even felt that he couldn't repay his debt to his father in this life. The Thunder Ancestor shook his head. No one knows. Ling Qingshui's immortal bones were definitely not destroyed. But after the Thunder Doom, nothing was left. At that time, the Ghost King of the Ghost Clan built a cenotaph for him, which is in the Ghost region of Han Sek today. Later, the cenotaph was probably gone because of the appearance of the Ice Demon in the old haunt of the Ghost Clan. Ling Li took a deep breath and clearly heard the drumming sound of the blood in his heart. The golden blood was the symbol of the son of an immortal. He didn't practice much during this time, but his strength directly broke through the Deshang realm and reached the Junior Emperor realm by relying on the bloodline. It could be imagined how powerful his father was at that time, but such a powerful father was defeated by White Demon's intrigue after all. I will atone for my father's sins, for the creatures of Qingshui's circle, to eliminate White Demon. The Thunder Ancestor shook his head and laughed. You are too weak. But if you have time, it's hard to say. You were born in this world, and Qingshui's circle is your mother world. You don't have the defects of your father. If you can become an immortal, White Demon is definitely not your opponent. But become an immortal. The Thunder Ancestor's eyes showed helplessness, and his voice was ethereal. It's hard, no matter how much time it takes. The killing intent in Ling Li's eyes soared. Whether it was for his father or Li, he swore to kill White Demon. Aga, what you lack most is time. The Thunder Ancestor pointed to Su Li. Compared with you, she has a higher probability of success, which is why I bet on her. Her strength and influence were completely formed in just a few years, which was so fast that even White Demon didn't fully react. If you want to kill White Demon, following her is indeed the best way. Why does Su Jiuzhou fight against the Life Palace? Seeing that the Thunder Ancestor was not surprised, Ling Li couldn't help but ask. She is a rare genius in tens of thousands of years and a Junior Emperor realm at the age of 100. As long as she is given time, she can become an immortal in a short time. Why does she ask for trouble? This was what he couldn't figure out the most. Su Jiuzhou could be regarded as an evildoer among evildoers in both strength and wisdom. But why did such a woman have to face such a powerful opponent as White Demon when she was weak? Ah boy, you are so naive. Do you think you are the only victim in the world? The Thunder Ancestor smiled meaningfully. Su Jiuzhou's hatred for White Demon is no less than yours. What's more, as long as White Demon knows her existence and her potential and horror, he will kill her. Fortunately, she is patient enough to show up in front of the world until the Ni sect becomes a great power. With Qi Tian of the Chimo Circle, White Demon can do nothing. Speaking of this, the Thunder Ancestor got up, and the illusory shadow sank into the darkness. I have said all that should be said. I will go to see Su Jiuzhou. Do as you wish. Lingli took a deep look at Su Jiuzhou's silhouette in the darkness, and his eyes flickered. What will your hatred be? 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. A light flashed outside the mountain-guarding matrix of the holy sect of Wind Thunder, and 2 figures were spat out. With a flash of earthy light in her eyes, Su Li bowed to the mountain-guarding matrix, and then turned away without saying a word. Seeing this, Lingli immediately followed. Su Jiuzhou. Su Li paused, turned her head, and said expressionlessly, I will give you the reincarnation mirror before smelting the divine thunder of the 5 elements. Are you satisfied? Lingli was shocked and forgot to say what he originally said. Seeing this, Su Li sneered, and her figure flashed away quickly, leaving only an afterimage of a black skirt. I'm just worried about your safety. If Su Jiuzhou died in the fusion of the 5 thunders, it would be a pity. He had never been able to understand Su Jiuzhou's thoughts. Lingli sighed, and his figure flashed into the sky to follow her. The black skirt just now was inexplicably familiar, but his heart was full of helplessness for Su Jiuzhou's misunderstanding, so he didn't think much. Well, after arriving at the Xian house and getting the reincarnation mirror, everything would be considered in the long run. Ding, ding, ding. In the center of the Life Palace, the small golden tower suddenly began to jingle, and the picture loomed. Does the image of fate begin to emerge? The low laughter wandered in the darkness. Death is coming. How will you choose? Qingshui Nun. Senior Sister Apprentice, Holy Maiden. Senior Sister Apprentice. Xian Yu heard the hurried shouts outside, and suddenly woke up from meditation. She picked up the token given by the master beside her, hurriedly opened the door, and asked, How is it, Junior Sister Apprentice? Has the master's wife come out? The Junior Sister Apprentice nodded repeatedly. I heard the sound. Hurry up. Oh! Xian Yu immediately turned into a sword light and rushed into the place of practice at the fastest speed. Sure enough, when she saw the door of the cave in the center was wide open, she looked happy. She tidied up her messy clothes, walked in, and shouted, Master's wife, called Chui Zi. Come here. Xian Yu turned her gaze and saw a woman in red, who looked to be in her 30s, reclining on a soft couch made of unknown fur. She was holding a tobacco pipe in her hand, and her snow-white skin was even more enchanting in the smoke. Master's wife. Xian Yu jumped in front of the woman obediently, and carefully covered the woman's clothes. Master's wife, you are so little again. Master will be angry if he sees you. That bastard? The woman rolled her eyes, and her red lips opened slightly. He only knows how to hide in his hometown, motionless like an old turtle. He hasn't come to see me for a long time, and he still dares to be angry? As she said, the woman suddenly threw away the tobacco pipe and pulled Xian Yu's face with both hands. She pulled Xian Yu's face with both hands and said, Our Yu is the best. You know to come to see Master's wife. Oh, Master's wife, don't make trouble. Xian Yu quickly broke away and handed the token to the woman. This is from Master. When the woman saw the token, she immediately restrained her flippant look and became quite solemn. Isn't this bastard always cautious? Why is he so reckless this time? What's the background of Su Jiuzhou? Well, I don't know. Said dryly. Seeing that the master's wife's face fell, she immediately added, "But he is the benefactor in master's divination, and the only feeling I have when I touch him is amazing. So strong." The woman raised her eyebrows. "Stronger than me? But he is only the first on the Tianjiao list, and I have also won it." But he forcibly arranged 4 people of an eye sect to be on the list, which is really an eye-opener for me. "Oh, master's wife, I know you are powerful. If you are not too lazy to fight, even those from holy sects may not be your opponent. But this is not the time to fight fiercely." Pursed her lips. "This is a dead test, a dead test. You have to take it seriously." The woman waved her sleeves and said with a strange smile, "Isn't it just the hard and fatal-like lock? You were too young back then, and now you regret it. If I die, that bastard will also be buried with me. Why are you so nervous?" "Alas, master is also suffering. Damn it." The woman suddenly got up and swayed to the door of the cave. With her back to she looked at the sky outside, and her domineering voice suddenly became cold. You leave here first." Yuer's body stiffened. "None, you come out." Chapter 629. You can search Poisonous Wife in Baidu. Search for the latest chapter. The woman turned around and looked down at her clothes. She frowned slightly, but didn't say much. She just shook her body and changed the revealing red dress into a green-brown Taoist robe. She made a Taoist salute with one hand, and a horsetail whisk appeared in her other hand. Her eyes were elegant and natural, as if nothing could affect her mind. How long have I been sleeping?" Yu braced herself and replied, I just arrived." Her heart thumped. Why did Shui Nun wake up at this time? If Su Jiuzhou came, wouldn't she run into trouble? "Don't you know?" Shui Nun looked cold and walked out of the cave. Yu quickly followed. "Nun, your soul is weak. Don't walk around." "I'm afraid that if I don't come out for a walk, I will never come out," Shui Nun said calmly. When the little junior sister saw her, she suddenly widened her eyes and was surprised and happy. "Master, you wake up. It's been 900 years." "Huan Shui Nun's cold eyes were a little warmer. "How was everything during my sleep?" Huan nodded and held Shui Nun's arm. While talking, Yu followed silently with a worried look. "Everything is fine in the sect, but it's not peaceful outside. By the way, master, the Tianjiao battle has just ended." Huan chattered. It was rare to see her master wake up, so she seemed to have endless words. She talked about the major events in the past 900 years in one breath. Fate Ancestor can't do anything to Su Jiuzhou. It's not easy. Shui Nun's expression seemed to never change. She said at a constant speed, "If possible, I want to see her." Huan didn't know about the dead-end test, nor did she know that Yu had contact with Su Jiuzhou. She just nodded and said, "I heard that Su Jiuzhou is less than 100 years old, and her cultivation is only at the peak of Yuanying realm. But her combat power is comparable to a junior emperor. She is so talented, but her mind and strategy are even more powerful. Ni sect has become more and more powerful, but the Fate Palace has no response. She should be afraid. Never underestimate the Fate Ancestor." Shui Nun scolded. Exhaustion flashed in her eyes. Half of the blood stained her eyes, but she forced it back down. She said lightly, "I just came out for a breath of fresh air. Can't you wait a little longer?" "Master, your divine soul," Huan asked worriedly. Shui Nun pulled up the corners of her mouth, revealing an abnormal smile. Master and disciple comforted. "It's okay. Master will always be with you." Huan-er's eyes turned red. Yu and her master's wife had a secret, and so did she and her master. The Fate Ancestor had planted the substitute life goo in his master's soul. Although the heavenly star divine water had recovered, it had also caused irreversible damage. His soul was weak, and he fell into a long coma. If he continued to remain unconscious, it was only a matter of time before he died. At that time, the Heavenly Star Valley Master's Tao companion had lost her physical body. However, because she cultivated in the Divine Soul technique, even if she lost her physical body, she was still alive. However, because her cultivation was too strong, an ordinary physical body could not withstand it. The Heavenly Star Valley Master came up with a way to replace his Tao companion's divine soul with the Master's ocean of consciousness. The two coexisted, and the Master's divine soul could also be nourished by Tao. It was killing two birds with one stone. It was true. After 10,000 years, the interval between the Master's awakening was getting shorter and shorter, which proved that the divine soul was recovering. The Master was getting better, but she didn't know if she could wait for the next time the Master woke up. Although she called Xian Yu her senior sister apprentice, she still looked like a teenager, and even the measured bone age was also a teenager, but in fact she was more than 13,000 years old. Her time had stopped since 10,000 years ago, and her cultivation had stopped at 3,000 years old forever. The lifespan of a person in the nature's test realm was only 15,000 years. Your incantation is still there, which means that the thousand-faced demon girl who cooperated with the Fate Ancestor is still in this world, but I don't know where she is hiding. If you can kill her, with the foundation you have accumulated in the past 10,000 years, you will definitely directly enter the half-emperor realm, or even higher. Qing Shui Nun comforted her with a voice transmission. Don't be afraid. Master will help you. Huaner was silent. How could the Master help her when she was extremely weak? The thousand-faced demon girl was a half-emperor 10,000 years ago, and her means were evil and vicious. Now, after 10,000 years of accumulation, she must be more powerful. Who could be her opponent? At this moment, an old woman in the same Taoist robe came in a hurry. Seeing Qing Shui Nun in the courtyard, she was surprised. Grandmaster Qing Shui, you are awake. Qing Shui Nun nodded. Chu He, you have worked hard these years. It's my duty. Grandmaster, what are you talking about? Speaking of this, the old woman suddenly said, by the way, Grand Elder, you happen to wake up. I can't make up my mind, so Su Jiuzhou comes to visit our house and wants to borrow the most precious treasure, perfect chakra. Grandmaster, what do you think? Su Jiuzhou? Qing Shui Nun was surprised. She was just talking about this woman with Huaner. She didn't expect that the devil would come when they talked about it. I want to see her in person. That's great. Huan also wants to see this evildoer. Seeing Qing Shui Nun and others walking out of the courtyard, Xian Yu almost cried out. How could it be such a coincidence? In the front hall of Tsiyun House, after serving tea, Suli heard a series of footsteps after waiting for a while. She looked back and saw a group of people walking into the room. The head of Tsiyun House was the second one, and the leader was a Taoist nun who looked no more than 30 years old. Grand Elder Qing Shui? Ling Li was surprised. He had heard a lot of rumors about Grand Elder Qing Shui. It was said that she was possessed by the devil in practice. Sometimes she was sober, and sometimes she was crazy. Now it seemed that she was sober. They were lucky. I'm Su Jiuzhou. Are you Grand Elder Qing Shui? Suli got up and lowered her head slightly to show respect. Grand Elder Qing Shui turned her face expressionlessly, walked to the center of the hall, and sat down. She said first, the most precious treasure of Tsiyun House will never be lent to outsiders. As soon as she said this, Su Jiuzhou frowned slightly, and Ling Li's face was slightly gloomy. It seemed that she was not very lucky. Xian Yu heard this, and everything went dark in front of her. It was over. According to Su Jiuzhou's bad temper, even the master couldn't do anything to her. If Qing Shui Nun confronted her head-on, she would be doomed. Suli sipped the tea and smiled peacefully. Now is different from the past. I see that your soul is weak. If I can help you recover immediately, will you still lend me your perfect chakra? Will you still lend me your perfect chakra? As soon as she said this, Huan Er's eyes immediately lit up. Qing Shui Nun was calm when she heard this. She slowly put down the horsetail whisk in her hand and said slowly, as the sixth-generation successor of Tsiyun House, I can't violate the ancestral teachings. Su Li frowned, and finally felt that Qing Shui Nun was difficult to deal with. Then what do you want to lend the most precious treasure to outsiders? If Qing Shui's circle falls, your Tian house can't be alone, right? Qing Shui Nun closed her eyes. Taoism follows the natural law. Everything in the world can't be forced. Donor, please go back. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly became stagnant. Su Li put down the cup, smiled slightly, and got up then. I'm leaving. After that, she turned around and left. Xianyu was anxious and caught up with her. Grand Elder Su, don't leave in a hurry. Listen to me. Lingli sat in the hall and stared at Qingshe, a nun who was still indifferent. He said softly, I hope you won't regret it in the future. After that, he also got up and left. Huan wanted to persuade him to stay, but Qing Shui Nun pulled her sleeve. Master. Huan was anxious immediately. Qing Shui Nun suddenly opened her eyes, and her pupils were instantly stained with blood. Her Taoist robe turned into a red one. I can't stand it anymore. Qing Shui, you damn Taoist nun. Why are you still so pretentious at this time? Huan only saw a red shadow flashed in front of her, and then she lost the figure of her master. Goddess of Blood God. Huan looked at the figure that rushed out at a rapid speed and felt grateful. Sometimes her master was pedantic and cared about her face. If she could have a little bit of the forthrightness of Goddess of Blood God, maybe they wouldn't have fallen into such a situation that year. Xianyu just caught up to the front of the mountain gate and saw that Su Li had already stepped out of the mountain-protecting tactical matrix. She was burning with anxiety. But at this moment, there was an explosion in the sky. Wait, Su Jiuzhou, stop. Su Li stopped and looked stunned for a moment. This voice belonged to Qing Shui? Why did it feel like a different person? A red shadow flashed, and Qing Shui had already surpassed Su Li and stood in front of her. She stared at Su Li breathlessly and smiled. Jiuzhou, don't rush to go. Let me entertain you well. You can use the nuisance wheel at will. I won't complain even if you break it. Speaking of this, cyan anger appeared in Qing Shui's eyes again. Shuang, Tian House is not your blood god sect. You shut up. The blood in the eyes of the red dress rose and instantly drowned the cyan color. It turns out to be two souls. Su Li suddenly saw through Qing Shui in front of her. Master's wife, you come out. That's great. Xianyu breathed a sigh of relief. She excitedly walked to the woman in the red dress and apologized. Sorry, Grand Elder Su. My master's wife and Qing Shui Nun share a physical body. Qing Shui Nun is old-fashioned and pedantic, but she actually hopes that someone can stand up to fight against the Fate Ancestor. You don't have to worry about the treasure of Tsiyun House. My master's wife can make the decision. So, shall we go into the hall to talk in detail? Su Li said with a smile. Xianyu saw that she was not angry and immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Grand Elder Su, please come in. Lingli looked at this scene strangely and then looked at the revealing clothes of Qing Shui in the red dress. He couldn't help but think that rumors were harmful. Su Jiuzhou returned to the hall and couldn't help but smile bitterly when she saw that her Grand Elder had become Goddess of Blood God again. Why are you just looking at me? Why aren't you taking out that wheel yet? Shuang leaned on the soft couch without caring about her image. She casually took out a cigarette stick and rolled her eyes to Chu He, the current master at Tsiyun House. Chu He smiled bitterly and looked at Huan. Huan was silent for a moment and nodded. She couldn't continue to be pedantic like her master, which would only harm others and herself. That's right. Shuang nodded with satisfaction. Huan, learn more from me and be more open-minded. If people are autistic, they are no different from salted fish. Shuang. Chapter 630. You can search Poisonous Wife in Baidu. You can search for the latest chapter. Ha! You don't want to listen to me? Blood Cherry sneered. Damn Taoist nun. You have been an eyesore for a long time. If Bai Xiao didn't want to save you, wouldn't it be better for me to take over the body of fate ancestor's lackey? The cyan light flickered in Blood Cherry's eyes. After a while, she seemed to be unable to quarrel with Blood Cherry and finally fell into silence. At this moment, Chui came into the hall with a colorless origin wheel. She smiled bitterly and said, "Fellow Taoist Su, this is the treasure of our sect, the perfect wheel. However, only Grand Elder Qing Shui knows how to use it." The implication was that if Grand Elder Qing Shui didn't agree, no one could use the treasure. Is that so? Xian Yu didn't expect it, and Blood Cherry was also embarrassed. Su Li frowned slightly and was about to speak, but Huan suddenly stood up and said, "It's okay. I can use it too." Chui was stunned and blurted out, "Youngest Grand, your identity, youngest Grand?" Xian Yu looked at Huan's childish face in amazement. "Huan, aren't you a junior sister apprentice? It doesn't make much sense to hide my identity." Huan smiled and looked up to Xian Yu. "I heard what you said to Goddess of Blood God. Since it is a dead end, it is also my master's dead end. I can't sit back and do nothing." Speaking of this, Huan looked at Su Li. "The perfect wheel is quite complicated to operate. Grand Elder Su, would you like to go to the cave with me to talk about it?" "Of course." Su Li chuckled, and Huan beckoned the wheel to fall into her hand. She nodded to the crowd and said, "Everyone excuse us." Su Li glanced at Ling Li and transmitted the sound in silence. "I won't use the wheel immediately. You can wait for a few days and see in house, or you could do your own things and come back in 2 days." Ling Li nodded slightly. He wouldn't leave. The whereabouts of Li's reincarnation was the top priority. Alas, in the end, I still can't help. With a flick of the Blood Cherry smoke pipe, it got up and swayed back to the cave residence. Xian Yu hurriedly followed. They couldn't stay idle. Although they didn't know how the death calamity would descend, it was always good to be prepared. In the blink of an eye, only Ling Li and the head of the Qian house were left. Chui smiled politely and said, "Master, how about moving to the guest room?" Ling Li breathed a sigh of relief and nodded. The Taoist nun of the merciful Cloud House had a pure heart and few desires. She was not as gossipy as the Grand Elder of the Wind Thunder Sacred Sect. While he was thinking about this, Chui suddenly turned around and asked with a smile, "May I ask, young hero, who are you to Grand Elder Su?" Ling Li. On the other side, Su Li and Huan walked together. Speaking of which, fellow practitioner Su, since you are related to the Skystar Valley, then you should know some secrets about the era of the Lord of Qingshui's circle, right? Su Li admitted frankly, "Yes, but I haven't experienced it personally." Huaner smiled embarrassedly. "You could tell?" "Yes," Su Li said softly. "If I am right, you are approaching the end of your life." "Yes," Huaner recalled. 10,000 years have passed in the blink of an eye. The catastrophe of that year seems to have happened yesterday. It is so clear. The natural laws means of erasing memories are really horrible. But sects like us all have profound foundation and always have some trump cards. Therefore, behind every powerful sage sect, there would always be a few existences who knew the truth. But after another 10,000 years, the traces of the truth will be fewer and fewer. Speaking of this, Huaner looked worried. She stopped and looked directly at Su Li. "In fact, we don't have much time, do we?" Su Li was silent for a moment and nodded gently. "Then hurry up. I will teach you how to use the wheel. Although this treasure is in the hands of my master, you can use it freely with my help after she falls into a deep sleep. I will tell the Goddess of Blood God and try not to let my master come out and mess things up." "Thank you," Su Li nodded and said. Then her eyes flashed. "What is the background of the Goddess of Blood God?" The Goddess of Blood God is the cultivation companion of the Lord of Tianxing Valley, and also the old ancestor of the Blood God sect. Huaner smiled helplessly. The Goddess of Blood God doesn't forbid killing. The sect is also between good and evil, which is almost the opposite of my master's idea. I used to have a lot of misunderstandings about her, but after 10,000 years of contact, I have completely changed my mind about her. I even envy her a little. If I can do what I want, maybe I won't end up like this. The Blood God sect? Suli remembered the Shuyin bandits she had met in the Tianjiao battle. Is the Blood God sect still there? No. Huaner's eyes were full of respect, and she said cautiously, the people of the Blood God sect are all like the goddess of Blood God. They don't hold back when dealing with the Fate Palace, so they were specially targeted by the Fate Ancestor. They were all wiped out. The goddess of Blood God also lost her physical body at that time. She seems to be carefree, but in fact, she occasionally shows sadness and guilt over the years. She probably feels sorry for the dead people of the sect if she is still alive. Speaking of this, Huaner paused, and her expression showed coldness for the first time. I don't know if anyone has told you that in addition to the Fate Ancestor, there is another person you need to pay attention to. 10,000 years ago, she was called the Thousand-Faced Witch, and my curse was planted by her. Su Li's eyes flickered. Almost instantly, she thought of what Fong Ling had warned her back then. Could Fong Ling's master and the Thousand-Faced Witch be the same person? The Thousand-Faced Witch. No one knows what she looks like. However, her reputation had spread far and wide. Many of the Fate Palace's sinister schemes were her handiwork. Moreover, she also contributed to the refining of the poisonous substitute life insect. If it weren't for her, the Fate Ancestor wouldn't have escaped from Qingshui Palace lords so easily. Huana sighed softly. That's all I know. I hope I can bring you some help. As she said, she made a gesture with both hands, and the complete wheel immediately lit up with white light and floated between the two of them. Now I will transfer my mark of recognition to you. It will take about a day. Huaner's voice gradually faded, and she was immersed in the stripping of the mark. While Suli was still receiving the mark in the Xian house, Xianghua, who was far away in the holy sect of Wind Thunder, was running around. After being tortured by the poisonous substitute life insect for hundreds of years, he actually joined a small secret circle. In this circle, there were 20 elders or grand elders of holy sects who had not yet surrendered to the Fate Palace. It was said that this circle had been established after the destruction of the Qingshui Palace, and it had a history of more than 10,000 years. It had a unique space that could temporarily isolate the influence of the poisonous substitute life insect, and could also monitor the degree of a person being poisoned by the poisonous substitute life insect by unique means. They called this circle removing the poisonous substitute life insect. The meaning was simple and straightforward. The purpose was to find a way to get rid of the poisonous substitute life insect with the efforts of everyone one day. It was said that there were 50 or 60 people in this circle at its peak, including 80% of the forces of holy sections. But later, as the holy sects were infiltrated by the Fate Palace one by one, the number of people became fewer and fewer. The Grand Elder of Meizong used to be one of them, and he had seen him. Unfortunately, he heard that the Grand Elder was beyond cure and was directly kicked out of the circle. So, when Su Jiuzhou told him about the Grand Elder of Meizong, he had no doubt. At the same time, because of the isolated space here, he could take a gamble when Su Li used the means to isolate the influence of the poisonous substitute life insect. Fortunately, his gamble paid off. After the ecstasy, he immediately began to summon the members of removing the poisonous substitute life insect. He also knew that this matter was of great importance, so everything was carried out in secret. It took 7 or 8 days to summon all the members in secret. The isolated place was hidden in a very small mortal village. It was just a courtyard surrounded by a simple fence, but every table, chair, and stone was placed in a very particular way, which coincided with the natural law. At this moment, in the usually empty courtyard, men, women, old and young entered one after another. The mortals living in the village seemed to not see them at all and continued to live as usual. When the last person arrived, Xianghua, who had been waiting at the table in the courtyard for a long time, suddenly opened his eyes and looked solemn. Everyone, long time no see. The white-haired old woman standing at the outermost of the courtyard, holding a crutch, said unhappily, Xianghua, you know that Ni sect and the Life Palace are confronting each other now, and it is a sensitive period. Why do you still use the most advanced carrier rune to summon us? Yes, Xianghua. Another grand elder of a holy sect also said in a deep voice, we have discussed before that we should not meet for nearly 1,000 years. Why do you summon us in such a hurry? What's the matter? Xianghua looked at the unhappy faces of everyone, but he still smiled. Before talking, let's swear according to the old rules. The white-haired old woman and others looked slightly relaxed, and the doubts in their hearts were slightly relieved. Since Xianghua was still willing to swear, he was still sober and not completely eroded by the poisonous substitute life insect. Their words were overbearing, undoubtedly wanting to probe Xianghua's situation. Since the establishment of removing the poisonous insect, there had been a crisis of information leakage, and they were even cleaned up by the Life Palace. Fortunately, no matter how heavy the casualties were, this circle still existed, and the rule of blood curse oath was born. I, Xianghua, hereby make a blood curse oath. If half of what I said today is passed into the Life Palace, I will be sucked dry by the curse power, and my soul and body will be tortured to death. As soon as Xianghua's voice fell, a blood-colored rune was automatically condensed into nothingness and engraved on the back of Xianghua's hand. When Xianghua finished, everyone followed him to swear. Looking at their proficiency, it was obviously not the first time. For existences at the junior emperor level like them, it was a shame to entrust their lives to the oath, but they who were parasitized by the poisonous substitute life insect were no longer qualified to talk about shame. When everyone finished swearing, Xianghua's suppressed joy suddenly overflowed, and his voice was trembling with excitement. Everyone, my poisonous substitute life insect has been removed. As soon as he said this, the audience was silent, and only dozens of sudden, rapid breathing sounds could be heard. What did you say? The white-haired old woman's voice was hoarse. She was the grand elder of the sage sect who was the closest to being completely eroded. She had given up hope, and today she followed the rules of the circle to go through the formalities, but she did not expect Xianghua. A big smile appeared on Xianghua's face. Although I don't know what the principle is, this method was taught by my adoptive father. You guys can try it. Chapter 631. You can search Poisonous Wife in Baidu. Search for the latest chapter. What's the way? Xianghua, tell us quickly. No matter what, we have to try. After the shock, everyone asked one after another. Xianghua had expected this and quickly appeased them. Don't be impatient, everyone. The method is very simple. I will tell you everything in detail. This matter has a lot to do with Ni sect. If you get rid of the poisonous substitute at the same time, even if there is a tactical matrix to isolate heaven and earth left by a senior, it will inevitably be noticed by Fate Ancestor. At that time, our advantage will be gone. Xianghua's words calmed everyone down. Grand Elder Xianghua, tell us, we are not young people. We have experienced ups and downs over the years, and we have already seen through it. Tell us first, what should we do? The white-haired old woman was so excited that her eyes were slightly red, and her tone was still calm. Xianghua immediately described what he had encountered, including the instructions of Thunder Ancestor and the change of getting rid of the poisonous substitute. Fellow practitioner Xianghua, do you mean that as long as we sincerely submit to Ni sect and Su Jiuzhou, we can force out the poisonous substitute? Someone couldn't help frowning. What's the reason? Xianghua nodded, and then shook his head. I don't know the principle, but we have also studied it in the past. The poisonous substitute seems to be related to the illusory fate. Su Jiuzhou won 4 positions in the top 10 of Tianjiao list. Her luck is unprecedented. Although we had some guesses at the time, how can the poisonous spell and the fate spell be related? Some people were tempted, and some doubted. For a while, everyone fell into silence. Only the white-haired old woman took a deep breath and stood up, Since we are not sure, why not try it? I don't have much time left, so I will explore the way for you. Senior Feng Shi. As soon as these words came out, many people were moved, but Xiang Hua comforted her with a smile. Senior Feng Shi, you will be glad that you made the decision. The white-haired old woman nodded. Although Xiang Hua was an example, as long as it didn't happen to her, or she saw it with her own eyes, it was always hard to believe. The white-haired old woman took a breath and said loudly, I, Feng Shi, on behalf of Fenglin Palace, sincerely submit to Ni sect in Jiuzhou region. I will respect the Grand Elder of Ni sect and Su Jiuzhou as my master. I will never regret it. As soon as he said that, many people's expressions changed. Patriarch Phoenix Dream is going all out this time. She's not leaving any room for retreat. What other way does she have? Either she gets rid of the substitute goo, or she dies. Phoenix Forest Palace will also perish along with her, falling into a desperate situation. Holding his breath, Xiang Hua stared at Patriarch Phoenix Stream nervously. He didn't understand the theory behind it, so he wasn't sure he could succeed. But he had come anyway. Even if it was just for the slightest possibility, he had to try. 1 breath, 2 breaths, dozens of breaths passed, but nothing happened. Patriarch Phoenix Stream's face turned deathly pale. This was her last hope, but it didn't work? Impossible. How did it fail? Xiang Hua couldn't believe it. Why hadn't Patriarch Phoenix Stream reacted when he had succeeded? What did I miss? Forget it, this is my fate. Patriarch Phoenix Stream's eyes dimmed, as if he had lost his spirit, chi, and spirit, and looked even older. Suddenly, she let out a muffled groan, and her eyes turned white as she fell to the ground, twitching violently. Not good. Everyone's expression changed dramatically. Patriarch Phoenix Stream is going to be completely eroded. Xiang Hua was alarmed and anxious. Hurry! Let's work together to suppress her. Patriarch Chen Su, who was on good terms with Patriarch Phoenix Stream, bellowed angrily. Save her. Who could suppress her? No matter what, we have to try. Otherwise, what happened to Patriarch Phoenix Stream today will be our tomorrow. His words seemed to work. A female patriarch in the crowd had a resolute look in her eyes. Without a word, she took out a white porcelain bottle, opened it, and poured Patriarch Phoenix Stream's water into it. It said that back when Tyanyak Attic roamed the cultivation world in Heavenly Star Valley, he publicized the method of making Heavenly Star divine water in an attempt to weaken the Life Palace's influence. I've been preparing some for years, but it's not very effective. Now I can only try it as a last resort. The female patriarch put away the jade bottle and stared at Patriarch Phoenix Stream nervously. However, Patriarch Phoenix Stream's trembling didn't stop. Instead, it became more violent, and she started foaming at the mouth. How can this be? The female patriarch murmured to herself. Patriarch Chen Su turned his head and covered his face with his hand, speechless. Let her die in peace, another patriarch said with a sigh. One of the ancestors sighed. She'll become a puppet of the Life Palace in a moment. I'm sure she doesn't want that to happen. It's better for her to die peacefully. This is what we all have to face. Xiang Hua's eyes were filled with self-blame. If he hadn't acted rashly, Grand Elder Phoenix Dream might have been able to hold on for a while longer. However, it didn't seem to make much sense. Let me do it. I'll pierce her sea of consciousness with my sword. That way, she won't feel any pain. A middle-aged man walked out with a sword in his hand, his expression solemn. He made a seal with one hand, and the flying sword immediately shot out of his hand. Just as it was about to pierce through Patriarch Phoenix Stream's head puff, an old hand suddenly grabbed the flying sword. The owner of this hand was Feng Shi. She slowly sat up, her white hair disheveled. The middle-aged man's expression changed. Patriarch Phoenix Dream, how can you be so fast? Everyone shivered and took out their magic treasures. Just as they were about to cast spells, they heard a faint sound coming from within the white hair. Wait, I haven't been invaded yet, wretch. Before Patriarch Phoenix Dream could finish speaking, she suddenly felt nauseous. Propping herself up on the ground, she vomited. An unpleasant stench spread in the small space. But everyone seemed to smell the most delicious smell in the world, and they all stared at Patriarch Phoenix Dream without blinking. Crack! A white bug half an inch thicker than an arm fell to the ground, mixed with saliva. Then, with a shrill shriek, it exploded into a bloody mist. Seeing this, Xianghua finally relaxed, and a smile appeared on his face. Patriarch Phoenix Dream stared blankly at the bloodstain caused by the goo substitution bug. The pressure in her sea of consciousness was gone. After thousands of years, she finally experienced the long-lost, unprecedented relief. I'm really cured? Her voice trembled as she collapsed on the ground, completely disregarding her image. Everyone's eyes were sore, but they were also very excited. The hard truth was right in front of them, and they had to believe it. As long as they submitted to NI sect, they really had a chance to get rid of the goo substitution bug. I seem to understand now. The eyes of the female old ancestor who gave her the divine water of divine stars lit up. Patriarch Phoenix Dream, the luck of your Phoenix Forest Palace is still not as good as that of the holy sect of Wind Thunder. You are still a little bit away from suppressing the goo substitution bug by submitting to NI sect. The divine water of divine stars is extremely effective in suppressing the goo substitution bug. At this point, the female patriarch's smile widened. Congratulations, Patriarch Phoenix Dream. Haha, Patriarch Phoenix Dream let her white hair flutter, and her whole face glowed. Thanks to your divine water of divine stars. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have died. That's nothing. The female old ancestor's eyes were clear and distant. With a little admiration, all of us should thank Su Jojo. If she hadn't established an ice sect, the goo substitution bug would have been the burial place of all of us. No medicine can cure it. Patriarch Phoenix Dream froze for a moment, and then nodded sincerely. She just took a gamble in a desperate situation, but now she was glad that she had the courage to take a gamble. Luck is changeable, but as more sects join NI sect, its luck will definitely rise. Patriarch Chen Su smiled. That is to say, as long as enough sects join NI sect and are strong enough, all the sects may get rid of the goo substitution bug. All the sects can get rid of the substitute goo. We can even form an army and fight against the Fate Palace. Haha. Everyone laughed, and Patriarch Phoenix Dream's eyes narrowed into slits, which were frighteningly bright. This is something that we didn't even dare to think about in the past. Xianghua nodded with a smile. Su Jojo is extremely determined to fight against the Fate Ancestor. Maybe after all of us get rid of the goo substitution bug, we can go to see her. Yes. Of course we have to see our leader. However, we have to think about how to prevent the Life Palace from finding out in advance. It doesn't matter. Except for Patriarch Phoenix Dream, no one has been affected by the goo substitution bug for a long time. There are so many of us, and we can come up with a solution. Haha, if I don't kill the Fate Ancestor, I am not a human being. I am not a human being. At this moment in the Tianxing Valley, Bai Xiu suddenly opened his eyes, looked up at the sky, and pinched his fingers to calculate. The celestial phenomenon has changed, but it is not obvious. The fate is still on Su Jojo's side. Bai Xiu got up and turned into the inner hall, and a unique fragrance of the star divine water rushed into his nose. If what Su Jojo said is true, this little star divine water seems to be not enough. We have to refine more? Bai Xiu muttered to himself, and then remembered the embarrassment of being controlled by Su Jojo in the cottage, and couldn't help but smile bitterly. There has been no abnormal phenomenon in the past 100 years. How could Su Jojo appear? No abnormal phenomenon in 100 years? Didn't that mean that Su Jojo's soul was not a new soul? Bai Xiu suddenly thought of something, and his pupils instantly shrank to the size of a pinhole, and his heart beat violently. Doesn't that mean Su Jojo is likely to be? Ding! Suddenly, An extremely ear-piercing alarm interrupted Bai Xiu's train of thought. Bai Xiu's face suddenly changed when he heard this sound. He could no longer care about other thoughts and scrambled to the innermost addendum. There was nothing in the addendum except a white compass. But now this white compass had turned into a pure color, like the eye of a devil. Oh no! Bai Xiu was horrified. Without saying a word, he took out an ancient carrier rune and crushed it. He shouted with all his strength, "Tell Su Jiuzhou to run away." At the same time, Blood Cherry took out the broken carrier rune in confusion, and her eyes slightly sank. This was the dead guy's most precious thing. Now it was broken, but no news came out. What was the reason? It seems that I am not late. But at this moment, a laugh sounded from the nothingness. Hearing this unique tone imprinted in her soul, the bloody light in Blood Cherry's eyes surged, and her face was completely gloomy. Chapter 632. You can search Poisonous Wife in Baidu. Search for the latest chapter. White Demons. A bloody shadow flashed over Xian House. Blood Cherry stared at the man in white who appeared out of thin air not far away. His face was still as blurred as in her memory. "It's really you, White Demon?" Blood Cherry sneered like a knife. She clenched her fists, and a blood-colored mark flashed out between her eyebrows. In the blink of an eye, Qing Shui Nun's black hair was dyed red. "I can smell your disgusting odor from far away." Bai Ming gently flicked his sleeves and said with a gentle smile, "It turns out to be my sister-in-law. How is my dear brother recently?" "White Demon, don't think that I dare not kill you because you have my body. I will get back the dead of Blood God Sect sooner or later." White Demon squinted his eyes and chuckled. "Then I will wait and see." Blood Cherry seemed to hit cotton. She was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. She snorted and looked around. "Where are your minions? You are so timid that you can't travel alone. Let them all come out and I will kill them all." The White Demon shook his head and smiled. "Sister-in-law is still so reckless. In fact, you know in your heart that it is not me who killed the people of Blood God Sect, but you, right?" "Shut up." Blood Cherry scolded harshly. She raised the tobacco pipe with one hand and fiercely smashed it. The tobacco pipe instantly turned into a blood knife, which turned into a sky full of knife shadows and rushed to White Demon. Just when it was a few meters away from White Demon, it was blocked by a transparent barrier, and the knife shadows were smashed. Blood Cherry's pupils suddenly shrank, and she retreated into the mountain protection matrix without saying a word. "Don't you want to see who I brought here?" Bai Ming spread his hands and smiled wildly. "Then as you wish." Crack! As soon as he finished speaking, a crack appeared on the transparent barrier. Then, more and more cracks spread along the crack and covered the barrier like a spider web. It was as if a mirror that reflected the sky had suddenly shattered and revealed the truth. The master of Xingtian Shrine was the first to appear. A faint smile came from his black hood. "Xian House, you dare to openly collude with NI sect. Xingtian Shrine must enforce justice on behalf of heaven. Today, you will be destroyed. Ankuei Valley will naturally advance and retreat with the Life Palace." As soon as the voice fell, a green-robed old man with a blue face and a tall and thin body, like a praying mantis, appeared like a phantom. The green ghost fire in his eyes burned quietly. "Huangxing Hall doesn't want to meddle in the affairs of the sect." The elegant and noble woman landed beside the Fate Palace. She looked at Blood Cherry coldly as if looking at a sinner, but Xian House has gone too far this time. You even tried to break the peace of Qing Shui's circle for tens of thousands of years. I have to intervene. Ha ha ha. Blood Cherry laughed crazily, her blood-red hair moving even though there was no wind. "Yin Lin, you little slut, you still want to maintain your chastity after becoming a whore? I used to admire you for managing Huangxing Hall in good order at such a young age. It turns out that you were just a ball of straw." "Blood Cherry, you don't have to slander me." Yin Lin looked indifferent. We just have different standpoints. In your eyes, Fate Ancestor is the culprit who brought disaster to Qing Shui's circle. But in our eyes, he is the savior who pacified Qing Shui's circle. Without him, the future of Qing Shui's circle would be gloomy. Bullshit. Blood Cherry gritted her teeth. By Mo's selfish desire led to the destruction of Qing Shui's circle and the fault of cultivation civilization. Do you think you can deceive yourself by saying this? Lin looked at Blood Cherry disappointedly and sighed. For the future of Qing Shui's circle, that sacrifice is nothing. Blood Cherry, your vision is too narrow, which leads to today's destruction. Summer insects can't talk about ice. Forget it. Lin shook his head and sighed. Then behind him, grand elders of holy sects appeared one after another. There were hundreds of them. 3 of the 4 peak holy sects actually came. This battle was obviously more than when they went to destroy an ice sect at that time. Blood Cherry's face was pale, but she still sneered calmly. Fate Palace really thinks highly of Xian House. Even a lion fights a rabbit with all its strength. Mo waved his hand, and all the grand elders of holy sects immediately surrounded Xian House and stared at Blood Cherry coldly. You know, I have always been extremely cautious. This is a good habit. Sister-in-law, how long do you think the big tactical matrix of destroying the house can last if I let everyone fight together? Blood Cherry's pupils suddenly shrank. She wanted to stall for time, but how could Mo give her a chance? He waved his hand with a chuckle, and hundreds of pressures of Junior Emperor instantly broke through the sky. The sky suddenly turned dark, and even the light avoided it. It was like the end of the world. Puff! In the cave, suddenly spat out a pool of blood, and the ceremony of transferring the mark of owner recognition was suddenly interrupted. Suli was also a little affected. Her face was slightly pale, but it became ruddy in an instant. She saw Er's face was full of horror. It's the 1,000-faced demon girl. She is nearby. She interfered with me, and the ceremony failed. Suli suddenly got up and spread her divine awareness out of the cave. Her eyes immediately changed. When she was about to go out, who had blood on her mouth, held her legs tightly. No, you are our only hope. You leave here. Trembled and took out a thumb-sized triangular rune from the universe ring. She forced it into Su Li's hands and said quickly, "This is the most precious treasure I have preserved since ancient times. Even my master doesn't know about it. The Interrealm Transmission Rune. I don't know if it is still useful. But now the only choice is that you try to use it and leave temporarily. When you are strong in the future, you will come back for revenge." Su Li pinched the triangular rune and slightly squinted her eyes. She softly comforted who was trembling like a frightened rabbit. "Relax. Maybe things are not as bad as you think. Hurry up. Leave through the transmission matrix." Chewie received the message and immediately arranged for everyone to evacuate temporarily. When passing by the guest room, she stopped and hesitated for a moment. Then she pushed the door open and said, "Young hero, Xian House is facing an unprecedented." Before she finished her words, Chewie was so shocked by the face of the person in the room that she completely forgot to continue. "You evil, I know." Ling Li, who had restored his original appearance, stood up and walked to Chu He. He looked at the sky and said, "Hurry up. I will delay time with Qing Shui Nan." Chu He was shocked and full of doubts. Was he really the evil emperor? "Hurry up," Ling Li urged. He stamped his feet on the ground, and his figure suddenly rose. "Wait." Hearing this voice, all the grand elders of holy sects saw the person clearly. They all paused and immediately looked at the Lord of Shengtian Shrine with doubts. "Ling Li, you are really here." The tone of the Lord of Shengtian Shrine fluctuated, and he said sharply, "I will give you another chance. Go back with me. You are still the evil emperor of Shengtian Shrine. Go back." Ling Li was so angry that he laughed. "Go back and continue to be used by you as a tool in your hand to suppress my Qing Shui palace." The Lord of Shengtian Shrine suddenly trembled. "You actually know, Lord of Shengtian Shrine, I have said it before. Mo crossed his arms in front of his chest and gloated. Ling Li is born to be rebellious. He will betray sooner or later. Do you regret stopping me from killing him in the cradle back then? The Lord of Shengtian Shrine stared at Ling Li and gnashed his teeth. No. More. Later. Regret. Ling Li? Evil Emperor? Bloodcherry looked at Ling Li with burning eyes. The malice in her eyes faded and was replaced with a little joy. You are the son of the palace lord? Young lord? I was one of the 4 generals under the command of the palace lord. Bloodcherry. Ling Li was about to say something, but Mo waved his hand impatiently and said in a cold tone, I don't have time to watch you recognize your relatives. Since you have a connection, it is better for you to have a companion on the way to hell. You want to break into my Tsian house? Bloodcherry's hair suddenly turned from red to black. Her eyes turned cold, and her blood-red dress turned into a Taoist robe. Qing Shui none. Ling Li called. Qing Shui glanced at him and immediately said, Tsian house has been standing for 30,000 years. If today is the end of the world, I will be the successor of the 6th generation of Tsian house. As the 6th generation successor of Benevolent Cloud House, I have let down my ancestors, but I definitely won't let you have it easy. Speaking of this, Qing Shui's indifferent eyes burst out a gloomy, evil spirit that was more horrible than blood cherries. Tian's strange tactical matrix, open. A huge ghost shadow suddenly shrouded the whole Tsiyun house. The quiet and peaceful Tune house immediately became a ghost domain that was several times more gloomy than the Shiraba. Fate Ancestor smiled slightly, the strange tactical matrix of all spirits age. Qing Shui none, you can really hide. But the time has come. You will die today. Why do you struggle needlessly? Qing Shui none was indifferent and silent. As she thought, the ghost shadow turned into thousands of shadows and swallowed all the people of Fate Ancestor into her abdomen in an instant. Puff! Qing Shui spat out a big mouthful of blood, which dyed her Taoist robe red, but she still looked indifferent. She said to Ling Li, who was standing on one side and quite at a loss, Today, since this is my destiny, I will not choose to escape. Go to find Su Jiuzhou and take this opportunity to leave quickly. None. Before Ling Li finished speaking, Qing Shui covered her mouth and coughed violently again. Blood dripped from her fingers, and her sighs sounded. Don't let me down. Go. Ling Li's eyes were slightly wet. After a moment of silence, he solemnly said, I once misunderstood you. It's my fault. None. Take care of yourself. Speaking of this, Ling Li decisively turned and rushed into the cave, only to see that Su Li had just integrated the perfect reincarnation wheel into her body. She got up and walked to Ling Li. She took a deep look at him, and then took off the reincarnation mirror from her waist and threw it to Ling Li. She said calmly, You can go. Ling Li was slightly stunned and said bitterly, Qing Shui none chose to sacrifice herself for time. Let's leave together. I'll let you go. Su Li turned around, stepped over Ling Li's side, and walked to the front of the cave. Looking at Qing Shui Nun, who trembled from time to time in the nothingness, she suddenly smiled. I promise Xian Yu and Bai Xiao. I can't go back on my word. Su Jiuzhou. Ling Li couldn't help but be angry when he saw that smile. Don't be impulsive. What's the difference between you going up like this and dying? He stepped forward and was about to pull her sleeve, but found that countless black symbols suddenly gushed out of her sleeve. In the blink of an eye, he was completely sealed and couldn't move. You are so long-winded. Su Li turned her head and brushed the hair behind her ear. She smiled sweetly. I am not impulsive. Chapter 633. You can search Poisonous Wife in Baidu. Search for the latest chapter. Outside the cave, Chui walked in and saluted respectfully. She hesitated, Grand Elder Su, can you really save the Grandmasters? Su Li pursed her lips slightly, and the black light in her eyes began to flicker. Take Yuer and Ling Li away. It will not be good if you are hurt accidentally. Hearing this, Chu Yi somehow felt at ease. She nodded, picked up the two who were sealed with both hands, and quickly disappeared from the cave. Ling Li stared at Su Jiuzhou, who was getting farther and farther away. His eyes were full of grievance and anger. Su Jiuzhou, you better die. Otherwise, I won't let you go in my life. He hated people like Su Jiuzhou the most. She wanted to bear everything by herself and didn't want to implicate others. But he hated himself more. Weakness is the original sin. A faint voice suddenly came to Qing Shui Nun's ears. She suddenly turned around and saw Su Jiuzhou, who should have left, appeared beside her, with her black skirt fluttering in the wind. You didn't leave? Qing Shui Nun frowned. You should understand that you are shouldering a heavy responsibility. You can't be reckless. I never felt that I had any heavy responsibility. Su Li smiled brightly. I deal with Fate Ancestor because I hate him to the core. I only learned the secret of the last era when I was searching for the news of Fate Ancestor. But what does it have to do with me? As long as Fate Ancestor can die, I don't care about anything else. You, Qing Shui Nun's expression changed. She was about to speak, but Su Li interrupted her and whispered, You should go. Go? Qing Shui Nun was a little confused. Me? Su Li smiled slightly and clenched her fist with one hand. The inhibition that was set when Qing Shui Nun was not paying attention immediately tightened and bound Qing Shui Nun in it. Qing Shui Nun widened her eyes and wanted to speak, but found that she could do nothing but stare. Seeing that the ghost shadow began to dissipate, Su Li narrowed her eyes and whispered, Xin Yuer. Swish! A sword shadow sprang out of Xian House. After dissipating, Xin Yuer looked embarrassed. Grand Elder Su. Su Li looked at the gradually clear figure in the ghost shadow, and her tone was still calm. Take your master's wife and go. But, Grand Elder Su Yu, before Xian Yuer finished her words, Su Li turned her head expressionlessly and said, You will only cause trouble if you stay here. Xian Yuer felt suffocated and her eyes turned red. She immediately picked up Qing Shui Nun, bowed respectfully, and flew into the benevolent cloud house and disappeared. Su Li quietly watched her go away, and suddenly a cold voice full of laughter came from behind. You are really here, Su Jiuzhou. Su Li slowly turned around and saw Fate Ancestor standing not far from the mountain protecting tactical matrix. She suddenly smiled like a flower. My Lord Fate Ancestor, I've heard a lot about you. She glanced at the supreme elders of the Glory sect who appeared one after another, and her eyes darkened. Your target is not Merciful Cloud House, but me, right? I'm just trying my luck. Bai Ming had a smile in his eyes. This is not Juzhou region. The entrance of Qimo Circle is 100,000 miles away. Can you still summon Qitian? I can't, Su Li admitted frankly, her gaze sweeping across the many sacred sect's supreme elders. But you want to keep me here with just these substitute goo puppets? You are naive. Naive? Bai Ming smiled, and his face suddenly turned cold. Let's see who is more naive. Boom! Hundreds of streaks shot at Su Li without warning. In the blink of an eye, they penetrated the mountain-protecting tactical matrix and shot at Su Li. But Su Li seemed to have expected it, and her figure suddenly disappeared. Want to hide? The Lord of Huangxing Hall flipped her hand, and a palm-sized glazed compass flashed out. As it rotated rapidly, a beam of glazed light illuminated the nothingness. Su Li's figure, which was hidden in the dark, had nowhere to hide. Boom! 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 Hundreds of junior emperors attacked at the same time, and the streaks covered the sky. In the blink of an eye, the entire mountain where the benevolent cloud house was located was blasted into ruins. Su Li frowned slightly, and her figure flashed several times in succession, shuttling through the gaps. But the beam of glazed light seemed to lock her, so that she could no longer hide. At first, it was just a simple power stripe, and Suli could dodge it. But later, the Grand Elders of Holy Sects used various means to attack, which made Suli unable to dodge. It didn't take long for her to be slightly injured. Ho-ho, since the Lord of Huangxing Hall has taken action, I can't just watch. The Lord of Anke Valley spat, and the whole area was suddenly shrouded in green smoke. The strong toxicity corroded the nothingness, and even the streaks of other holy sects attacks were eroded. I have fed the poison with the most poisonous poison in the world for thousands of years. How much can you resist? Su Li's face suddenly changed, and she covered her mouth and nose with a muffled groan. But it seemed that she had eaten something. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of bright red blood, which turned into blood beads floating around. Ha ha, Lord of Huangxing Hall, it seems that I am better. The Lord of Anque Valley was arrogant, but the expression of the Lord of Huangxing Hall remained unchanged, but the compass in his hand suddenly stopped. The glazed light broke from the center and turned into a light prison to fix Su Li in place. Su Li's face changed dramatically. She punched the light prison, but she was sent flying by the countershock. Under the influence of her injury, she spat out another mouthful of blood. More and more blood beads floated in the nothingness. The smile of the Lord of Anque Valley stopped abruptly. The Lord of Huangxing Hall glanced at him and said softly, "Everyone, you can start." All the grand elders of holy sects immediately began to accumulate power, trying to condense the strongest blow in their lives. The light in the nothingness was getting stronger and stronger, illuminating the world that even the sun avoided as if it was daytime. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine let out a relaxed smile. Without Qitian's support, Su Jiuzhou, you are just a useless weakling. Goodbye. As soon as these words came out, all the grand elders of holy sects were shocked and threw out the spells in their hands at the same time. At this moment, Su Li suddenly raised her head, stared at Fate Ancestor high above in the sky, and showed a smile. Fate Ancestor's face suddenly changed, and he shouted in an unprecedented urgent voice, "Stop!" But even he himself knew that it was too late for him to say that. Boom! The unprecedented explosion blasted cracks in the nothingness, constantly twisting like long snakes. The blood beads were like red gems. Under such a bombardment, they still did not evaporate but were shot away in an instant. Under the terrifying momentum, they turned into blood arrows and shot at many grand elders of holy sections. They exploded with a bang, and no one was spared. But the power of these blood arrows was not much. They just made many weak grand elders take a few steps back, and then they could no longer do anything. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine also accidentally stained the corner of his clothes. After he couldn't get rid of it, he tore off the bloody corner of his clothes in disgust and wondered, "My Lord Fate Ancestor, why did you stop? Su Jiuzhou should be dead, right?" Fate Ancestor stared at the empty nothingness, and his expression was unprecedentedly gloomy, without saying a word. He had a strong intuition that Su Jiuzhou deliberately showed weakness just now and used him, but he didn't know what exactly she used him for. This kind of feeling was the worst. I also think that Fate Ancestor, you are worrying too much. Hundreds of the power of Junior Emperor even blasted the nothingness. Su Jiuzhou must be dead without leaving any residue. As soon as the Lord of Anque Valley finished speaking, a woman's chuckle sounded in the nothingness. "Ho ho, Lord of Anque Valley, you really think too highly of me." The black skirt swayed, and the woman appeared out of thin air not far from Fate Ancestor. Her black eyes were as deep and dark as the starry sky. "Not only did I die without leaving any residue, but I have become a ferocious ghost and come to claim your life." When the Lord of Anque Valley saw the woman's face, his anger of being ridiculed suddenly disappeared. He couldn't help but step back in horror. You are? Holy girl, Su Li? You are not dead?" The Lord of Xingtian Shrine was full of disbelief. How is it possible? You. He looked at the black clothes on Su Li. You are Su Jiuzhou. I didn't expect that after 1,000 years, the giants of holy sects still recognize me. I'm really flattered, especially my Lord Fate Ancestor. The black light flashed in Su Li's eyes. You are my idol. You can make clouds and rain with a flip of your hand. I dreamed to have such power. So, after waking up, I can't wait to learn from you and establish an I sect. Do you like it? Fate Ancestor stared at Su Li. For the first time, he experienced the feeling of being schemed by others. He was still calm, but his voice was rarely low. You are very good. You are the first person to let me taste my anger. Oh. Su Li smiled like a flower, and her smile suddenly enlarged when she covered her mouth. That's really my honor. In order to thank you for your great kindness, I have prepared a lot of gifts today. I hope my Lord Fate Ancestor can like them. Fate Ancestor stretched out a hand and clenched the nothingness without saying a word. The space where Su Li was located was instantly annihilated. The twisted and destroyed Numa made the Lord of Xingtian Shrine and others retreat in horror. But Su Li's black shadow disappeared without warning and appeared among the grand elders of holy sects in the blink of an eye. My Lord Fate Ancestor is impatient. Then, I can't let you wait for a long time. Now, I will give you a big gift. Su Li laughed crazily, and the corners of her mouth reached her ears. Then she took a deep breath and suddenly spat out a blood ball that was comparable to a hill. After flying upward for a short while, the blood ball suddenly exploded. The red blood rain turned into countless fine needles, stabbing into everyone's body. Many grand elders used their means to resist, but the number of blood needles was too large, and the corrosiveness was extraordinary. In the blink of an eye, the protective means were pierced, and hundreds of grand elders of holy sects were stained with blood. The Lord of Xingtian Shrine also couldn't resist it. His face changed, and he retreated to Fate Ancestor to avoid being hurt by the blood needles. The Lord of Huangxing Hall was not as unbearable as the Lord of Xingtian Shrine. He stood there expressionlessly, looking at the grand elders of holy sects who were stained with blood, and his eyes flickered. The Lord of Anhui Valley was accidentally stabbed. He touched the blood mark on his neck, stretched out his hand, and spread it out. Looking at the bright blood flowing in his hand, he couldn't help but wonder, this is not poisonous? Why did Su Li make such a big fuss? When Fate Ancestor heard this, his calm face changed instantly. He grabbed the hand of the Lord of Anhui Valley, and there was a trace of caution and puzzlement in his eyes. Su Li was created by him, but he couldn't understand the evilness she showed now. How ridiculous! Want to know the reason? Su Li laughed in a low voice like a nightmare. A black phantom appeared out of thin air and almost stood in front of Fate Ancestor. The suppressed volcano in her eyes suddenly erupted. Let's talk on the road to hell. Chapter 634. You can search Poisonous Wife in Baidu. Find the latest chapter. The mortal city was bustling with activity. The children, who were only 5 or 6 years old, were happily chasing and playing in the streets. Suddenly, with a boom, the earth shook and the mountains swayed. Earthquake! The whole market was in a mess. Stalls were scattered everywhere. He crawled out from under the stall and spat out a mouthful of dirt. When he raised his head, he stared blankly at the huge mushroom cloud rising in the distance. What's that? The earthquake was not only in this mortal town, but also in the entire Xian territory. Even several big regions near the Xian territory were faintly affected, and cracks appeared on the ground. That's... A cultivator looked up at the sky and was shocked. Xian House? What happened to Xian House? The branch of Tainyake Attic in the Xian territory worked quickly. In just one day, according to Bai Xiu's order, the news of Xian House was spread to every corner of Qingshui Circle. The Life Palace was exterminated. 3 of the top 4 holy sects came out, In the end, there was a big explosion. The gate of Tsiyun House was razed to the ground. No one survived. Life Palace. Tsiyun House. Extermination. These three words immediately set off a huge wave in Qingshui's circle and became the topic of people's after-dinner conversation. Even in the mortal cities without information, the bad deeds of the Life Palace began to spread gradually. Such a storm was even worse than the victory of the Heavenly Sun against the Ni sect. However, no one from the Life Palace, which was at the heart of the struggle, stood out to refute. It was as if a closed sect had sunk into silence. The cultivators couldn't find the Life Palace, but the Huangxing Hall, which started from the Chamber of Commerce, suffered a disaster. Overnight, almost all the branches of the Huangxing Chamber of Commerce in all the big regions were destroyed by the angry cultivators. Tsiyun House is a quiet place for Taoist practice. The seniors of Tsiyun House are kind like water and never fight with others. How could such a sect be exterminated for no reason? The Life Palace, the top holy sects, are all bad guys. Wrong. Don't blame the Tianhe Holy Sect. Without the support of the Tianhe Holy Sect, the Life Palace would have dominated Qingshui's circle. When the whole Qingshui circle was in an uproar, the small world of Tianqing Valley suddenly became lively. It was all because of the arrival of the main character of this event, the benevolent Cloud House. More than 90% of the Heavenly Star Valley's disciples were male. As for the merciful Cloud House, it was 100% female. How could it not be lively? At this moment, in the forbidden bamboo house of the Heavenly Star Valley, Nun Qingshui's face was pale, but her hair was blood red. She sat cross-legged on the soft couch, and Xian Yu stood beside her, massaging her shoulders. Hi. Qingshui really doesn't take care of his body. He's lost 90% of his essence blood. Fortunately, I'm from the Blood God sect. Otherwise, I would be lying on the ground. Under the soft bed, Bai Xiu looked at her with a bitter smile, full of guilt. I didn't warn you in time, causing a disaster sigh. Lady Blood God, how is my master's? Huan asked cautiously with tears in her eyes. Blood Cherry rolled her eyes, took a puff of the cigarette, and spat out a white smoke ring. How can she be? She will probably wake up after sleeping for thousands of years. Don't worry, she won't die. But if I remember correctly, you are the first disciple of Qingshui, Chen Huan, right? You are in the early stage of nature's test for thousands of years, and now you are still... I don't think you can see her. Huan's eyes darkened, and she whispered sadly, yes. Blood Cherry couldn't bear to see such an expression. She couldn't help but turn her eyes uncomfortably and change the topic. Where is the young lord? Lingli went out with a mirror. Bai Xiu's expression was a little complicated. He got the whereabouts of Su Li, but lost the evildoers Su Jiuzhou. Was it a loss or a gain? I believe in Grand Elder Su. There seemed to be light in Xian Yu's eyes. If she died, the whole Ni sect would be buried with her. She came forward bravely at that time, which means she was well prepared. At least, she was sure to escape. But what about the mushroom cloud? Chen Huan's question was like a basin of cold water poured on Xian Yu's head. Probably only an unprecedented fierce battle can erupt that kind of power, right? Bai Xiu sighed and shook his head. Since the big explosion, the sky is chaotic, and it is difficult to see clearly. The bamboo building fell into silence. In the Tianqing Valley, there was a spiritual waterfall falling 3,000 feet, which was very spectacular. Lingli sat on the rock at the top of the waterfall, stroking the reincarnation mirror in his hand. This was the first time he had such a close contact with a reincarnation mirror, but he could be sure that it was the real thing at first glance. After staying there for nearly 100 years, how could he forget the breath of reincarnation? It had been several days since he came to the Tianqing Valley through the transmission matrix from Tsiyun House. He had got the reincarnation mirror, but he hadn't tried to open it until now. In his heart, there was something called guilt that was haunting him. Su Jiuzhou gave him the reincarnation mirror according to the agreement, but he didn't know whether she was alive or not. How could he open the reincarnation mirror? Shit, I'm suffocated. Suddenly, there was a roar from the reincarnation mirror, which shocked Ling Li and made him throw the reincarnation mirror out of the top of the waterfall. But before he recalled it, he saw the reincarnation mirror suddenly burst into a dazzling light, and then it floated in front of Ling Li. Ling Li was shocked and blurted out, "Are you the spirit of the reincarnation mirror?" "Shit, it turns out to be you, silly boy." The reincarnation mirror swore again, and then a black lotus ring appeared on the mirror with a flash. With a ding, it left the mirror and fell on the grass. Ling Li immediately remembered that this was the ring worn by Su Jiuzhou. How could it be here? This ring turned out to be a treasure, and it was full of spirituality. How could it scold him? "Shit, you dare to put me in the mouth of an idiot. I won't forgive you." Black Lotus was sad and angry, and he scolded loudly. The reincarnation mirror lit up at the right time, and it said sarcastically, "You only dare to scold me now." Black Lotus was speechless. The head of a little beast appeared on the reincarnation mirror, and its eyes fell on Ling Li. It was expressionless and even a little honest. "Are you looking for me?" Ling Li was nervous and nodded. "Mirror spirit, do you know where Su Li reincarnated? It turns out that you want to know this." The little beast suddenly smiled with a hint of mockery and immediately spat out a small half of the mirror that had not melted yet. "You can see it yourself." The reincarnation mirror was swallowed as expected. Ling Li saw it and immediately picked it up. After a while, the picture in the reincarnation mirror appeared again. Although the mirror was incomplete, it was enough to show the face of the reincarnated person. Swish clang! The reincarnation mirror fell from his trembling hands, and Ling Li's face was completely stiff, leaving only a pair of eyes staring at the familiar face revealed by the half of the reincarnation mirror. She still looked the same as in the previous life, except that there was a black lotus at the corner of her eyes. The black lotus ring on her finger, the reincarnation mirror on her waist, and the familiar black skirt. The reincarnation of Su Li was clear. The voice that she called him, Lord Evil Emperor, seemed to still ring in his ears. No wonder he would instinctively worry about her in the holy sect of Wind Thunder. He had never been tempted by other women, and he even thought that he was not loyal to him anymore. He once felt ashamed and blamed himself. At this moment, all the memories about Su Jiuzhou came to his mind. In the ghost region, she turned into a descendant of the ghost clan and made a scene. Her hateful eyes suddenly became extremely clear. "Do you want me to die so much? You would rather give up your life." Even if she was full of hatred, she just heard him and let him go. At the end of her divine awareness, he had not awakened his bloodline, but he helped the wicked and killed his clansmen. He was obviously heinous. The first elder of the Qingshui Palace did not recognize him and tried to let her kill him. But she did not do it after all. She even helped him awaken his bloodline and get rid of the control of the Xingtian Shrine. After that, he followed her footsteps for the reincarnation mirror. She scolded him, drove him away, and even beat him violently. Later, he was unwilling to stay with her and pretended to be her attendant. All kinds of humiliation and resentment became attachment and regret at this time. Why? Why didn't he find out earlier? He clearly felt a trace of familiarity when he saw the black skirt. But why didn't he think of it? Why? Why did he suddenly find out that the person he had been looking for was around him after she was in danger again? Black Lotus looked at Ling Li's changing face and couldn't help but chuckle. Look at him. Doesn't he look like a lost dog? Samsara Beast shook its head. If you talk nonsense again, be careful that the master will pull out your tongue when she comes back. I'm not sure if she really can't sense you. Black Lotus's smile froze, and then he chuckled. We don't say that Erlang is a trap. You just want to see him lose his soul, don't you? But the master has never revealed her identity. Obviously, she doesn't want him to know. You have a good time this time. When the master comes back, Samsara Beast's face darkened, and then he said cautiously, Then we won't tell anyone? Just say that the Fate Palace leaked it? You are worth teaching. Black Lotus smiled treacherously. When the master comes back, I'll sue you to death. Samsara Beast shrank back into the mirror with the reincarnation mirror. His honest face suddenly became serious, and he said gloomily, You are laughing happily now. When the master comes back, my main supernatural power should be restored. At that time, my merits and demerits will offset, and you can be unlucky. Come on, boy. Don't be like a face-changing ghost. This stupid donkey can still speak, which proves that the master must still be alive now, but we don't know where she is. Langley suddenly stopped and immediately stared at the reincarnation mirror. He stared so hard that the reincarnation mirror was scared. He hurriedly showed up and said, I am now the only blood sacrifice magic treasure of the master. If the master dies, I will be completely destroyed. So, the master must be fine. That girl is very tough. She can reincarnate even if her soul is destroyed. You are so nervous about this little battle. Black Lotus made sarcastic remarks, completely forgetting that he was so nervous in the reincarnation mirror that the ring was deformed. That you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.